Hello, my fellow Westorians. We're going to do a quick sound check. With so many guests, we want to make sure we have everybody before the official start.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone say hello real quick.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, maybe not all at once.
I think we're good.
We're good.
Oh, okay. I could hear them, but...
No, I mean, you can't. I want to know what the audience can...
Gotcha, okay.
So call on each of them individually.
Lady Gwyn.
Hello there.
Joe.
Hello. Good to see you.
Hello. I don't think I was officially nominated, but
Cool.
Chat, no one has... We haven't gotten there because we're always 30 seconds. Everyone...
Okay, someone said... Matt says, heard them all.
Sounds good. But, all right, sure.
Okay. We are back. It is the final episode of A Dance with Dragons, our official, as we call it, Valar Rereadis review. Review-us, we could call it. Re-review-us, if we were doing it again. It's been a long road. It's been really fun. A Song of Ice and Fire is, a huge series. It's not complete, so it's gaining hugeness as we speak, hopefully. And... well, one thing that comes with so much time spent in a world is, well, we have lots of thoughts, we have lots of familiarity, and that's a great thing. It's a thing to celebrate when we all are so deep into this material, we all understand it so well. If other people were to overhear us who don't know A Song of Ice and Fire, they'd be like, what the hell are they talking about? It's like we're speaking some other language, despite it still being English. I think we could compare us to... appropriately to Grateful Dead fans. That's appropriate because George is a big fan of the Grateful Dead, who they all go around to different places around the country. They all kind of know each other, even though they don't live in the same cities, and they're all obsessed with the same thing that a lot of other people don't exactly get why they're so obsessed with it. So that's us, right? Our hair isn't as long. We don't do as much drugs, but or any in some cases, but still. It's a wonderful community that we have, and I just like celebrating that here at the beginning as we've reached this great milestone. Now we shall introduce properly our guests after our sound check introduction, which is kind of the nature of live streams. You got to do what you got to do to make sure it's all working. So welcome back, recurring guest, great friend, Lady Gwyn of Radio Westeros. How are you doing, and how does it feel to be done with this current reread?
Well, thank you for having me back. I'm doing okay. Just we're keeping busy over at Radio Westeros.
Yeah, tell us what's going on over there with Radio Westeros these days.
Well, we're doing our Winds of Winter primer series, so we've kind of been almost in tandem with you as you've gone through Feast and Dance in terms of rereading, but we're looking forward to what's going to be happening in Winds. And actually, if I recall correctly, we started out in tandem as well, because we were doing our Game of Thrones prologue episode right when you started Valar Rereadis. So we kind
things
of
just lined up so nicely.
Taking this journey together. And,
we should start back at the same time.
I think that's where we'll be.
And welcome back, Nina. We tried to figure out exactly when you first started participating with Valar Rereadis. We thought it was around Clash, right? We didn't pinpoint it, but most of the time, and of course, you've been contributing before it was official as well. So how does it feel to get to this point and to be back here?
it's good. It's such a enormous series when you start out and you think of how many hundreds and thousands of pages it is, and then you get to the end, it's like, wow, we really went through it all, didn't we? So
yeah.
But no, it's good. You always learn something new. You always take away something new, and it's good to chat with it with friends. So
yeah, that's the journey and the destination are both great, right? It's fun to have made it
the
through.
Valar Rereadis really was the friends we made along the way.
yes. We made new friends. We strengthened existing friendships, and we all know the material a lot better than we did, which is itself a way to enhance all those friendships, because we all have, even more to talk about. And Joe Buckley, same questions for you. How does it feel to be through this current reread and to make it to get to this point again? And how are you feeling in general?
Best way I could sum it up was the day before last, I had 8 hours of sleep, which has not happened probably since we started Valar Rereadis. So that's the marker for you. That's how I progressed. That's how I'll remember it. But yeah, it has been a good journey. We've still got one more episode to do over on the Isle of Faces, so that'll be the true end. But I'll make sure I don't get too mixed up of where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be talking about today.
Of course, yes, yeah. You've done a great job over there. I know your show is fairly new, and I know Valar Rereadis has been a nice way for you to like have a lot of material to dig into and to get pick up a few more listeners and just to have a lot of content. It's been great. I know a lot of people have picked up your show along the way, and quite a few had already done so before. So that's probably pretty gratifying to just see your show grow as well along the way.
Very, very, very lucky.
Cool. Well, let's get started. One thing that I think is really neat, and I want to compare to TV, and I don't mean the TV show Game of Thrones, although you could apply some of this to that. Less so, though, because what I'm talking about is familiarity with characters. And when we all saw the TV show, most of us had read the books already. So if you hadn't, then you approached it a little differently. But let's take a lot of shows that you've seen like 5, 8, 10 seasons of. A lot of times, the first season, the characters maybe haven't completely been solidified. For example, say the X-Files. I don't know if you all recall or if you've even seen the X-Files, but the very first episode, Mulder was not a moody, sort of withdrawn, introverted guy. He was a geeky extrovert. Like, he couldn't wait to tell all his stories about aliens. That's just a very different character. And there's a lot of examples like that where, say, in The Office, Michael Scott, first season, he has his hair slicked back. His sense of humor is a little different. He's creepier rather than awkward. I mean, he's both. But these things find their way, right? They take a little while to get settled. And the same is true in A Game of Thrones. There's a few things early on in the early chapters that some of the characters do that you look back on it and it's like, that's maybe a little strange. Like when Tyrion says the Lannisters take what is offered, and it's like, do they? And someone calls Aegon Dragonlord, and no one ever calls him that again. And it's just, this is little tidbits like that where the world isn't completely settled. And the flip side of that is where we're at now. This does not apply anymore to any of us listening to About a Song of Ice and Fire. We know this stuff so well. And I think that's something that comes along with that. In book one, you want it to be interesting. You want it to be entertaining. But you maybe don't have expectations for character behavior because you don't know them that well. But now, 5 books through, however many years you've been in this fandom, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, who knows, you have opinions about characters. You have things you maybe expect them to do or don't do, and that really changes the picture. It really changes what your experience. When we see Daenerys behave a certain way or Tyrion behave a certain way in book 1, we're kind of like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. But when they do something in book 5, you're maybe more bought in and like, no, don't do that. Or wait, please don't. I hope it doesn't go this way. So that's something that I wanted to draw our attention to as we get started here, is just how much more bought in we are with all these characters and how much more our expectations have been raised, how much more personally we take a lot of it, and just seeing this long-term process. So real quick, we have a super chat from John Hagee. Says, can't make the live chat, looking forward to the podcast. Thank you, John. I know you've been around for quite a while as a listener and supporter, and we appreciate you making it here so regularly. I also want to point out that it's tempting in the Winds of Winter with it coming for us to get deep into predictions. We're going to have some predictions, but I'd really like to do that separately some other day because there's just so much of that. And if we get caught up in predictions, well, we're not going to do as much reviewing. So like I said, naturally, there's going to be some predicting. We're talking a lot about setup, but we're going to save most of the predicting for another day. What we're going to start with is what POV surprised you or that you focused on the most? It's kind of a similar question to where we started with our past reviews at the end of various books. So, Lady Gwyn, we'll start with you. What POV surprised you the most this time, or had you thinking new things?
Well, okay, I'm going to I'm going to immediately start by scratching my initial answer because I said I was surprised the most by Mel, and that was pretty much my first read. On the reread, I would say I was surprised the most by Ash Greyjoy.
Hmm.
I just like her more every time, and I really did not ever expect that, to be honest, after my first read of her. And then as for focus, sticking with the Greyjoys, I spend so much time focused on Theon. Untangling that northern storyline, and every time I reread these chapters, they never fail to yield up some new nuance.
Yeah.
So I just can't get enough of those.
I love all the
particular
different locations
storylines.
he goes to. That's something that's really neat, right? He goes to some cool places we've never been.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that's the main focus of his story, but just one little neat detail to consider. But that's
Yeah,
a good point.
That's some of those nuances and details that you can just kind of pick out.
Yeah, especially like at
Yeah.
Moat Kalen, we have a question from a listener that we'll get to about that later. Speaking of, y'all, if you're watching live, feel free to add your questions. We've got a lot of questions that we've taken ahead of time from folks on Patreon and Flick and Facebook and Slack and Discord, all our different spots, and some through email. So, but feel free to add more. Shea will grab them from the chat if she sees them, and we'll try to get to them. What about you, Nina? Where did you find your focus resting the most, or find your thoughts heading to the most, or spending the most time on?
Yeah, probably for me, Daenerys and Jon.
Okay.
They have two of the longest arcs, obviously, in the book. I would consider them the two most interesting for me personally. They're very complementary in a lot of ways. They're also very different in a lot of ways. But I just like focusing on them in particular this time around because I'm looking forward and thinking about, what's the end game? What are we going to look at in, the last two books? They are going to be the two, most central figures. No question, they are going to be at the heart of everything at the end. So, focusing on them when they finally really come into their own as leaders in this book was really engaging to me.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think we really tried to focus on that while we were going through it. It's something that's, I'd say it's a little more of an advanced class topic, is looking all the parallels between Dany and Jon, because you really have to know those stories well to be able to detect them. Some things you can detect maybe more easily, but there's so much of it is just layered under many levels of detail and subtlety. But you're right, they go through a lot of the same challenges with very different circumstances, yet not so different in other ways. So that's a really good point. And of course, I'm with you there too about Dany and Jon, because after the TV show gave us what it gave us, it's a big topic of discussion, like where the show is wrong, where it's not, what they just made up, what they left out. So, and of course, that's going to hit the biggest plot lines, the biggest, most important characters, the most. Joe, what about you? Where did you find your focus landing the most?
Well, if I was smart, I probably would have prepared better and looked back and found who I talked about most on average each time or something like that. But I haven't, so I'll have to kind of wing it. I think Lady Gwyn made a good point. For some of us who've done multiple rereads, you can kind of pick which one and who surprised you when, because it's different every single time you reread. That's just how much material there is, and you can't take it all in at once. But I think this time round, the ones I wasn't expecting to focus on as much were probably a combination of Quentin and Barristan, especially obviously as we get later in. I think I just kind of got Marine a bit more. I think beforehand, if you'd asked me any questions, I would have had to check the wiki and make sure I'm talking about the right person, because all the names are so different and there's so many characters anyway. This time I think I'd be a little bit better. Now, 2 weeks down the line, maybe it will go out of my head again. But at the moment, I feel a bit more comfortable knowing what's going on and what the theories are and everything like that. So I just enjoyed those ones a bit more. I just think I understood them a bit more. But also probably Arya would be my second choice, because I'm not a great fan of Feast Arya, but the two and Dance really turned me around, especially the last. I really love that chapter. And probably the prologue as well. Varamir's just, every time I read it, there's more and more, because obviously you read the book afterwards and you see why it's all in there. So it just is worth more every time you see it.
Well said. Yeah, I think I would echo what you said about Marine, understanding it better. Even though I had read it so many times, I'd never sat down and written and done this level of detailed exploration on my own. So mostly I'd been working with my own memory and just repetition of discussing it. So I'm with you there. That was a big change for me, understanding some of the nuance between the factions. I was not as clear on some things as I could have been before. And I would also say I spent more time, I think, thinking about kind of echoing Nina on more Daenerys than Jon, I think, because I'm more puzzled by what's coming for Dany and trying to figure it out, like paying attention to her state of mind. And the same with Tyrion. I paid more attention to Tyrion because he's someone that I think there's a attitude that Tyrion may have been one of the more misrepresented characters in the show versus book, but we can't be sure of that, right? There's no guarantee of that. That's just a strong guess that's out there. So I was really trying to reevaluate that guess. I know a lot of people expect Tyrion will maybe be a reason that will push Dany towards darker things. I'm not sure that we arrived at a level that makes me confident in that. Definitely see the possibility, though. So yeah, really just a lot of, I really could have answered that my own question in a lot of ways there, but I know you guys could have as well. But that's the nature of this. There's just so much to say. So let's have another question here. What makes A Dance with Dragons different from the other books in A Song of Ice and Fire? There's some obvious things that we maybe don't need to mention, or I can at least summarize here, like, well, it's got the most POVs, or it's, the most, it has plot points ending in the middle, which that doesn't really happen so much in the other books. But those are more large structural things. Let's see what kind of other answers y'all have. Lady Gwyn, what do you think? What are some of the standout differences within this book as compared to the other four?
Well, it is that it's setting up action for plot points that we haven't gotten the payoff for yet. That, especially those big battles that we're moving towards in multiple different locations, which is really a factor of page space in a couple of cases. But that said, there's a lot of action here, which distinguishes it from Feast, which obviously was very, very different. And we've moved on from what's largely kind of chaotic and tragic themes that were happening in Storm. We really see things starting to coalesce and the groundwork being laid for the conjunction POVs coming back together. And I wrote Big Bang metaphor. So the early books, everyone's going outwards. And then now in Dance, you can see everything starting to kind of shrink back down.
Yeah. Well said. In fact, that's how I opened every episode of A Dance with Dragons for Valar Rereadis, is with my little spiel. Part of it was, this book brings POVs together, and really that's something we're going to talk about specifically. We're going to line up where they started, where they ended, and so people can kind of get a great idea of just what that all means. What about you, Nina? You and I talked more than anyone else about this book throughout the process, so I kind of know some of the things you're going to say, but I'm eager to hear you say them because I think they're really good takes.
So I think the thing I wrote was A Dance with Dragons is a wonderful mess. And here's what I mean by that. A Dance with Dragons is really kind of a book in 3 parts. And I don't mean chronological parts, I mean, substantive parts. You've got one part, which is these really good book length arcs. So, Jon's arc, Dany's arc, Quentin's arc, Theon's arc, these really good, exploring a lot of really interesting themes and narrative styles. And then you've got the things I didn't finish, meaning the author didn't finish in A Feast for Crows, so I gotta keep telling you that story. So the Asha stuff, the Victarion stuff, the Arya stuff, to a lesser extent the Damian Cersei stuff. And I'm using stuff and not arc, because they're really not arcs. They're really just sort of the things I didn't finish.
Yeah, they're like part of an arc, yeah.
And part of an arc. You can read sort of Feast and Dance together as maybe their whole arc.
Yeah.
And then you've got the stuff you need to know for the Winds of Winter, so I'm going to throw it in there. So let's have Melisandre be a POV, because I need her to be a POV for the Winds of Winter. I'm going to introduce Don Cunnington, because I need him to be a POV for the Winds of Winter. I'm going to throw in a random Jaime chapter, because I kind of need to transition into what he's going to do in the Winds of Winter.
Yeah.
And all of these 3 parts all kind of don't really go together. They're all kind of these very disparate things. So it's sort of juggling these three balls in the air. And not that anything is bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's all really good stuff, but it's all kind of a mess. And when you find out that a bunch of chapters were moved from A Dance of Dragons to The Winds of Winter, it starts to make a little more sense as to how it ended up as kind of the wonderful mess that it is. I don't know if that would have made it more or less of a mess, but it's definitely an interesting entry.
It's really impressive. Yeah, I agree with you that there's these bit of chaos to it. It's really kind of impressive that it's not more chaotic, because as we know, like this was not his plan. He didn't. This 5-year gap was scrapped. He meant for it to be one book. There's so many things that he changed midstream, and the fact that they do work so well together is a testament to his abilities. Because it was not part of his initial plan. And also, I love to point out that he took actually, let me recompose this thought. Let me have Joe answer, because I'm discombobulated. So Joe, go ahead and tell us what you think A Dance with Dragons is different from the other books, while I figure out how I'm going to say my answer.
Well, I definitely am one of those people obsessed with how the structure's different, and especially in that final third, and how all the three main characters kind of take a back seat for a little while, and we get all the feasties coming back in, and we have all these smaller arcs to come back in. It's such a different structure. But in terms of actual plot and what's actually going on, if you can put like a word to each of the books, I think dance could be the most different words, if you get what I mean. Like, I think the first one I would think of is consequence. Like, we get all these consequences in the first 4 books, but as Nia's saying, at the exact same time, it's also seed setting for Wind. So it's a really interesting how he balances both of those. And then I guess in a meta way, I think this is going to be remembered as the middle book on its own, because I think Feast is something really different and like a kind of addendum. It's outside the normal line of the. So you have the first 3 all going to be grouped together. And I think you're going to have Winds and Spring. When it's all said and done, people will think of those 2 grouped together. I think this will be the one that people remember most, because like you said at the beginning, this is where the fandom kind of really exploded when the TV show came out. For most people, they've spent the most part of their time waiting for Winds, and hopefully we won't get the exact same repeat between Winds and Dream. But for people who have started podcasts or got involved in the fandom or just started reading in general, the average save state for them is at the end of Dance. So the bit we get to at the end here, like the big questions of here, like what happens to Jon and what happens to Daenerys and Marina and everything, those would be the ones that people will have spent the most time thinking about, because this is the time you spent most in the series, if you get what I'm saying there.
That's a great point. Yeah, this period in real life that might be 30 years from now, it might not be so clear to newer people how important this era was. But you're right, that's a great point. Like, as far as a fandom milestone or a fandom era, this is when the vast majority of new readers came to the series, when A Dance with Dragons was out, but before The Winds of Winter. That's a great point, yeah. To expand on what I was unable to formulate into words before, I'd say that there's a lot of interesting disconnection between so many characters, even though they come together so well. There's just spots here and there with chapter arcs or character arcs ending, as soon as 1/3 of the way through the book, like in Davos's case, and in Bran's case, it's only just around halfway. But I'm still impressed by how well the character themes connect to each other, and how well some of the parallels are going on with the type of conflict that they're facing, and as well as some of the places they go. For example, we pointed out at the time how many characters were underground all around the same time, with Quentin and Dany looking at the dragons underground while Bran was under the Hollow Hill, or the Three-Eyed Raven's Cave, whatever you want to call it. That location does not have an official name, does it? And while also Jon was going down under the wall to look at the wormways, all of this, and at the very same time, we have at least one more. I think Davos was in the dungeon. All these things were happening at the same time, and that sort of was reflected in the way we do our own homemade titles for the chapters. And whenever possible, we tried to make titles that would link, that connected to others, like they would have a similar structure to each other. And that became easier near the end of this book, because so many things were coalescing together. And so maybe that's a great way to put it, is this book is super chaotic, but by the end it really is you can see that a lot of that chaos is behind us as it works itself out. It's like George is working through his own changed ideas here, and by the end, it's like, yeah, okay, here we are. Okay, next question. Character who you have changed your opinion on the most since your first read. It's somewhat similar to the first question. There's a little bit of overlap, but it's definitely a different question in that who you focus on this time may not be the character who your opinion has changed the most. Like maybe like first impressions are a big deal, right? But after now, all of you all have read the series several times, so it's quite possible that your opinions have changed massively on certain characters. Let's go back to Lady Gwyn. What do you think? Who is your biggest change in opinion, character-wise?
I am going to have to stick with my boy Theon because
Okay.
I'm quite sure on my first read I did not feel nearly the same complexity of things about him as a character that I do now. And also to tag on to that first answer as well, Melisandre, because knowing her backstory and being in her head changes so much the things that you think about her when you read about her and other point of views. So when you go back on the reread, before you get her point of view, you already have this knowledge about her and the backstory. It really changes your perspective on her. And again, if we're talking about non-point of view characters, I'd have to go with Aegon because that's, factor of studying, delving into theories, and really, really, I think, very differently about him than I did the first time I read the books.
What about you, Nina? Who is your biggest change?
So kind of cheating because I'm repeating my first answer, but Daenerys is probably my the biggest change. I think when I first read this book, I was a little less appreciative of what the Myronese story was. I kind of looked at it as just sort of this is just sort of a holdover until Daenerys gets to Westeros, and I didn't really understand what kind of the thematic point of it was. But now having read it a lot, I think that I've come to some very key understandings of what the storyline is, what it is doing, how it fits into both the stuff she did before and the stuff that I think she's going to do going forward. So definitely Daenerys for me.
Yeah, you could kind of maybe, after all this time, I think we can't be 100% confident, but we have more of a sense of what George's plan for her is. And it's really quite intricate and amazing, even though
I mean, I
certain.
feel confident, but I could be 100% wrong.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. So, and Joe, what about you? Who has changed the most for you?
I actually really find it difficult to remember my first read for this book. Out of the 5, even though it's the latest, you'd think I'd remember better, but I really don't for whatever reason. But to be fair, I think because this reading experience and having to talk about it and really get into it and having to kind of get behind their heads, so to speak.
Oh, Ser Buckley's.
I'll take over with my answer then, and we'll just get back to him when he's back. So in my case, I'm gonna give 2 short answers rather than 1 longer answer. I'm gonna start off by saying Kevin, because Kevin is one that I basically fell for the party line with him. The kind of this thing Varys is saying, that he's a decent man in service to bad folk. And I just kind of took that at face value the first time I read it. But on multiple rereads, and it seems like every time I find new reasons to fake things. But this guy had a lot larger role. He never once argued with Tywin. He just went along with all these awful things. And then just really understanding too how much he had to do with the walk. And I didn't fully grasp how much of it was his initiative, and that's not great either. So I definitely see him differently, and that's more of a total attitude change for me in general, not just Kevin, like how I view people and the way their actions matter. So it's more of a life experience thing, but also on another level, I would say I view Bran differently than when I first saw him. Not being a super experienced reader when I read the series the first time, someone who more read as a more casually. That's something I think I've learned in the being in a Song of Ice and Fire reader over these last 20 years is just being a better reader. And with Bran, I really treated him more like a child. I really didn't think about how his upbringing was affecting his decisions. I didn't think about how his youth was shielding him from some of the horrors around him in ways that may come up later. And I think it's just like understanding how child's minds operate. Not that I can say I understand how a child's mind operates, but more than I did. And that really changes how I view the younger characters. This also has to do with how I see Arya, but Bran's even younger, so I think a little bit more towards him. Anyway, so that's how I am. Is Joe back by any chance?
Yeah, hello.
Okay. So you were talking about John Connington there, I believe, before you froze. I think John Connington himself was not happy with what you were saying, so
Probably.
he interfered. But we got rid of him, so you can continue.
Yeah, sorry about that. Whoever had me messing up first in the technological sweepstakes, I will send you your £5. I'm not sure what I was waffling on about at the time, but yeah, as you say, my pick anyway, to get on with the actual question, was John Connington. I don't think I was ever dead set against him on first read or second read or whatever it was, but definitely on this one, I'm just way more invested. He's kind of leapt into my top 5 of storylines or POVs I really, really want to get to for Wins, which he definitely wasn't beforehand. And again, with only 2 chapters, there's quite an effect to make, even however many times you read them. But definitely not even in terms of importance to the plot overall, not even in terms of Aegon, just of himself and what happens to him and what does he find out, and what's the truth he needs to find out, and what time does he have left, and all these many things. I'm more interested in him as a person than I am in his role in the plot, which I don't think I would have said before this reread.
Okay, yeah, well said. Now, most of the questions from listeners we're saving for the end or for the middle, but a couple of them I've put in other spots because they're particularly relevant, or I just wanted to I thought they fit in other places. And here's one from Noga F. If you had to add one, and space is no issue, in other words, you don't have to worry about the book getting too long, what POV would you add to A Dance with Dragons? And Noga says, for their own pick, Green Grace or perhaps some other Myronese local to get us more of an insight to what's going on there. Lady Gwyn, who would you add to A Dance with Dragons?
I'm going to continue my incredibly uncreative focus on the North. Can you guys guess what's my favorite storyline? I would pick Mance or Bowen Marsh, maybe. Especially Bowen Marsh. But also, this is kind of more tongue-in-cheek. How about Robert Glover? What the heck is he up to? I'd love to be in his head and solve that mystery.
He could give us some. He could also give us some extra fill in on some things that happened during the war too, because he was in the South for a lot of that.
Yeah,
just a little extra film. We may not need that, but I would definitely eat it greedily.
I would take it. Yeah.
Those are pretty good calls. Yeah, like the mind spins when you imagine the perspective of one of, because there's so many possibilities. You immediately are like, yeah, what would he be thinking about? Yeah.
I just want to be God and know what everyone's
yeah, I choose George R.R. Martin. Right. Joe, I see your answer is next here in the document, so we'll go to you next.
Well, I'll stick in the north as well, but a little bit further north. I'd pick Mira Reed if I could have any POV, just because, one, I just really love Mira and she should have more time on the page, but also I think, imagine if she just had one chapter after Bran's arc finished, how creepy that could be in her seeing the reality of what the cave is actually like and seeing Bran just tapped into the tree 24/7, and I don't know, she's wandering around wondering where Jojen is and she hasn't been told or something. It could be a very, very dark, creepy chapter. It'd just be interesting to get that setting without Bran's kind of childish mind being a barrier so much.
That's a good point. Yeah, I like that idea a lot. That's another one that just sends the mind spinning. Now I'm like, oh yeah, Mira. She could also think about like her father, which that's a big one.
Yeah,
that we're all really curious about.
She could find Dark Sister.
Yeah.
What's this?
and she'd be more interested in, like, she'd be less, like you said, she'd be less caught up with the mystical stuff, like personally. Yeah. So, and she could, the exploring and stuff. We could do that. That's a great idea. Nina, what do you think?
So I'm gonna be different, and I'm gonna go to a place that's not the North, and I'm gonna. No, I think Iri or Jikwi, I think would be interesting, and I say Iri or Jikwi because after 5 books, they're still basically interchangeable. But no, whatever. So. No, I think it's interesting. The idea of Daenerys is such a central, apocalyptic hero figure. She is someone that, all of these events are circling around. What is it like to have been with her almost literally from the beginning? They are with her from her 3rd chapter of A Dance with Dragons on. Like they are there. So having witnessed all of this that she's doing, witnessing her birth dragons, go through the Red Waste, go to Karth, sack these cities, rule Meereen. What is that like for them? What do they think of this?
Yeah.
What do they think of her coming from a slave society as they do? What do they think of her as being the breaker of chains? Coming from a society that does not grant women any kind of real political power, what do they think of her being a real political force? It's very intriguing to me. So yeah, I'd absolutely love to see what they think of Daenerys.
You could write the whole series from one of their points of view, and it would be pretty compelling. Yeah, that's a great answer. I like that a lot because you're right, it's so rich because it gives us there's so much. They've been there the whole time. Plus, we just don't have any Dothraki POV, so that too would give us a lot of insight into their culture and things. Just that alone.
Well, I wonder. Sorry, Ziz. I wonder. I think I'm right in saying so. For when we have Quentin and Barristan POVs, obviously for Barristan, but Quentin's 3rd one doesn't come until after Dany's gone either. So if we were to get an Iri or Jukwi, that would be the first time we ever see Daenerys through anyone else's eyes, except like Tyrion had that one kind of glimpse across the pit, but that's it. And she's, I would imagine, like one of the only POVs that we haven't seen, especially one of the main ones. So that'd be really interesting. I wonder if that is a choice by George that he's holding back on that for whatever reason.
That's a really good observation. Yeah, we haven't really seen her through other people's eyes pretty much at all. Great point, because Barristan's POV starts after she's gone, so he's thinking about her, but he doesn't see her on page. That's a really good point. I'm gonna give a somewhat structurally similar but different answer. I'm gonna say Aegon, young Griff, because I'm super curious, like how they treated this kid to make him think of who he is and the lies they told him, and what he thinks of his opportunity and his ambition, and just how he perceives it all. What he thinks of John Connington, what he imagines is true about his father, who isn't probably his father, and just little tidbits that we could pick up about Illyrio and maybe Varys as well. Things like that. I would be very interested in that. That would be pretty fun to get some. He says, really, this could be a whole episode. Other POV possibilities, just if we were to take more time and think them through and imagine what they'd be like. So anyone else out there, I would love to hear your thoughts on on other POVs. If you want to send us an email or tell us your insight or what you think would be awesome about certain other POVs.
Or just write one.
Yeah, just do it yourself. Yeah, just have at it. One thing I think makes this book different too is the way it ends. There's a lot of cliffhangers and sort of cliffhangers, which isn't necessarily the case for the other books. The other books have a lot of things get resolved sort of, or you can see how some new plot line is started. Like the end of Game of Thrones, you have all these exciting developments, like Robb is crowned and Dany's dragons hatch. And then at the end of A Clash of Kings, a lot of it is the end of this battle and of this that involves so many POVs, and then Bran, emerging from the crypts and all that. In this book, though, there's several things that somewhat, it's arguable what you would call a cliffhanger. I wouldn't call Cersei's trial being in 5 days a cliffhanger, especially because we know from pre-release Winds of Winter chapter that it seems to be resolved anyway. Barristan, I would say the same. That's not really a cliffhanger, having the corpses flung over the walls. It certainly says action is coming, but and that's also a ditto to Cersei's in that we actually already have some advanced knowledge of what's going to happen given the Winds of Winter chapters. Same goes for Tyrion, because Tyrion's right there with Barristan. John Connington, I would say basically the same thing, even though he's on another continent. We know he's about to take Storm's End. It's not really a cliffhanger because we have Arianne chapters that basically reveal that this was successful. But now we get into some of the other ones where it is start to be more cliffhanger, and there's a lot of these. Asha and Theon, also maybe not a cliffhanger, but really imminent. Battle is coming. It's really close. We have a lot of different POVs pointing to that. Davos, also not a cliffhanger, but this is more like the end of a one plot to beginning of a novel. We're very excited for what's happening with Davos, but I wouldn't call that a cliffhanger. Brienne's feast ending was as cliffhangery as you can get. Except, again, we found out that she's no longer hanging, and she's with Jaime. So I would call that a cliffhanger still, because Jaime leaving his army and going off with Brienne into what's certainly a trap of some kind, it's in the middle of the action. Dany, very much a cliffhanger. Dothraki, angry, armed, violent, right there. Her dragon, right there. Like, stuff is about to go down. But perhaps most of all, Jon's is a cliffhanger, because even though it seems pretty clear he's been stabbed to death and we're all pretty confident he's coming back, there's really nothing more cliffhangery than stopping a scene in the middle of action. as swords are drawn, daggers are dripping with blood still, and it cuts away. That's really as dramatic as you can get in terms of interrupting the action. So after all that, this long spiel of these different plot lines, which of these plot lines do you all think are you the most excited for, and which do you think is the hardest to predict, and or are you the most excited? So most excited for and hardest to predict. We'll go in reverse order this time. Nina, what do you think?
Hardest to predict, I would say, for me, unquestionably, is the Areo Hota storyline.
Ooh, nice.
Unquestionably, that is the hardest to predict for me, because I have literally no idea what George R. R. Martin is going for, other than like backdoor getting in information about the Danes in the Tower of Joy that he was probably going to get in before the 5-year gap wasn't a thing. But otherwise, I have literally no idea where it's going. I have no idea how it resolves. I have no idea how Areo dies. I assume he will die at some point, but I have no idea if it's going to be in the Winds of Winter, after the Winds of Winter, accompanying Doran's death, separate from Doran's death. No idea. So that for me is the biggest question mark of the Winds of Winter, is what is going to happen with that story.
Great answer.
Most interesting to me, there's a lot that are interesting.
Yeah, that might be a tough one. You may just have to pick one at random.
Oh my god. I like I think I think Sansa is really interesting to me, because it's a plot line that I think I have a general idea where it's going, but I also, there's enough room for me to have question marks and to wonder what's going to happen. So, I have a general idea of some story beats, but there's enough room that I'm like excited to be surprised by it, I guess is the best way to put it.
Right on. Okay, cool. And Joe, what about you? What do you think here?
Well, as you're speaking about the non-cliffhangers or semi-cliffhangers we have, I think we kind of have like the cliffhangers about to spill over into cliffhangers. Like we have the hint of them, but they're not actually quite there yet. Because if you look at the other elite, maybe not Feast so much, but the first 3, all the public points have been completed in those. So like Ned has fallen, or the Blackwater's happened. The big things have already happened in those books. Whereas this one, we still have personal cliffhangers, like a Dany, for example, but the big public things are still just over the horizon. So it's a slightly different type of cliffhanger, like you say. In terms of what I'm most excited for, well, the prediction ones, much like John, I know nothing. I'm absolutely terrible predictions, so I won't even bother you with all of those. But for the one I'm most excited to see, in terms of just instant aftermath, like which chapter do I want to read first, it will be up at Castle Black and just the immediate aftermath of what happens with John. If we're lucky enough to see it, maybe we're not, maybe we get it later on. But what I'm hoping is Melisandre, Ghost John, I don't care who, just show me that first 10 minutes after John hits the floor and everything goes off, because you've got, I don't know, like 7 different factions and nobody knowing what's happening. You've all got 3 different fights happening all at once, and how do they all do that? So I've just spent about 2 hours guessing what will happen over on the Isle of Faces. So I just want to see that chaos, because I think it'll be unlike anything we've ever seen, just massively complicated.
Maybe we should have answered 1-1 for a POV, because he's got a great view of everything happening in that scene, because he's so tall, everything. He can look down and see it. He can survey. Also, he's in pain. He's like, my stomach hurts. And Lady Gwyn, how would you answer this one?
Yeah, I was going to tag on to that because the enraged giant fascinates me. I want to know what happens with him. But really, the one I've been most looking forward to is the Brienne and Jaime storyline.
Ooh, nice.
And the Riverland stuff. The ones that I have the most, I wouldn't even say it's trouble predicting, kind of echoing something Nina said with Sansa and Davos. I have an idea. I think I have a pretty good idea of where both those characters are going to go, but how they get there, especially Davos, sometimes, I can see so many different possible paths. I really think he could show up at Castle Black, and then part of me thinks, well, no, wait a minute, he's out there on a ship from White Harbor, so it would make a lot more sense for him to have gone back to White Harbor, not Eastwatch.
To deliver Rickon,
yeah. So this just his basic path puzzles me, even though I feel like I know where he's going to end up. So
good point. Yeah, there's a lot of that journey is shrouded. You kind of expect him to succeed, and not die there. That would be pretty surprising. But what's he going to see there? Is there going to be some history? Is there going to be some shipwrecks from some of the other ships that we had 2 different examples of ships breaking up on Skagos or Skane during the course of the last book. And for all we know, there'll be some survivors or something like that. I don't know how that would necessarily be interesting, but it's just one of the many little detailed possibilities that we raised throughout the course of covering that. Personally, I would say given the lack of information, almost every plot line has been advanced a little bit in the Winds of Winter. Like Barristan and Tyrion have gone a little farther. We have a little more on Aeron. That's caught up. What we don't know what's happening is the plot line. It isn't really touched on in A Dance of Dragons at all, because like Nina said at the beginning, almost every plot line in A Feast for Crows is given like a little bit more. But the one exception is Sam's plot line. Even Sansa's plot line we get a little more because there's a Winds of Winter chapter. Arya's maybe there's nothing, and of course Jon there's nothing because that's a true cliffhanger. But of ones that we could reasonably expect a little more, that's that one I think about a lot. And also I just think more about Arya in general too, because I think it was more true for Feast, but my answer for which POV I saw differently the most, I think I said Arya for that one because I had new theories about her endgame and how she was going to interact with the Faceless Men going forward. And so reading this book, reading her just 2 chapters, or is it 3? 3? 2? I forget. Anyway, I think it's 2. And so I was really looking for details there to try to add to those theories and to look for more examples to back that up. So super excited for Arya. Well, Asha too, but Arya is who I meant to say. So let's talk about the plot lines coming together, the locations coming together. In the second half, we'll talk about how the thematic connections between these places, which I think is really important as well. That's more character work than the locations themselves, but still, the parallels are there. So I would argue that Arya is part of the Northern storyline. She isn't personally part of it, even though she has technically connected with it when she spoke with Sam and killed Darion. That's something. But it's not her personally, but her identity. The identity of Arya Stark is a huge part of the Northern story. That's undeniable, even though it's Jane Poole and not Arya. The name Arya Stark is clearly a big part of it. Bran is beyond... somewhat stationary. He was outside of the cave and then he went in it. His journey has all been there. Varamir beyond the wall, then he dies. Interestingly, Jon doesn't go anywhere the whole book. He goes to the Grove of Nine. Otherwise, he's Castle Black the whole time.
Melisandre.
Yeah. Melisandre's Eastwatch to Castle Black, but she's Eastwatch off page. She's pretty much Castle Black the whole time for her POV. Asha goes from Deepwood Motte to the Crofters Village. Not exactly a long journey, although it takes forever because of the snow. Theon ends up in the same place.
No, it's only a couple days by the crow's flies.
That's right.
Just a couple days.
Only a couple days. We'll be there quickly, in no time. No worries. And then the Dreadfort, Moat Cailin, Goldgrass, and Barrowton, Winterfell, and the Crofters Village for Theon. That's a lot of different spots, but he ends up with everybody else. Davos goes from the Sisters to White Harbor. This is all Stannis stuff, too, because Davos is telling us about Stannis, but he's disconnected from that. Theon is right there with Stannis. Asha's right there with Stannis. So I think that's pretty cool. That's a lot of POVs. We had 18 POVs, and that's how many is that? That's 8 of them right there, covered here. And by the end of the book, they're a lot closer. Their stories are linked. Like Asha and Theon are literally in the same spot, and so are Jon and Melisandre, and Varamir's dead. So, let's talk about connections between these characters and what things that are going on in the northern storylines. I'll rattle off a few general topics and then let you guys kind of run with the parts that you would like to speak to or things that you have the most to say about. Some things that we talked about a lot. Cannibalism, which is a theme of winter and starvation, and it's not really happening a lot, although it is happening some. More so, I'd say it's building up to there to be more of it. Lots of themes of being among the dead, whether we're thinking about the crypts or whether we're thinking about literal walking undead or we're thinking about people from the past who impact these POV characters, even though they're no longer living. Bran, of course, is amidst a lot of skulls. Arya is amidst a lot of dead faces and literal death cult. Varamir experiences the afterlife briefly. So there's there's enormous themes of death all over. And along with that, we have the human sacrifice, we have winter and cold and death. So that was a lot to say just now. So I'll turn it back over to you guys. Start with Lady Gwyn this time. What you obviously have said a lot about the North. It's a plot line that you've said is drawing your attention perhaps more than others. So what do you have to say about so much of this coming together and these overpowering themes that are building as we head towards the winter?
Well, I mean, what's coming together is, obviously a icy apocalypse.
Well said.
And whether that's brought about by, however it comes about, you've also got these major battles, major death events that are about to happen. So that's pretty terrifying. Then you have this cannibalism that you mentioned. It's mentioned so many times in all the northern point of view storylines that we have to assume that it's purposeful. It's building up towards something that's going to happen. It's going to happen more and more frequently.
What terrifies you more, like as a person, as a reader? Does it scare you more to think about The Walking Dead or to think about humans being so desperate that they have to eat each other?
Well, I guess I don't know, because if they eat each other,
it occurred to me that it's something more viscerally gross about the latter.
It definitely
so unreal.
is. But from an entirely practical point of view, if they eat each other, there are that many fewer zombies.
Eat your enemies.
Can't have zombies if you eat them
If
all.
we eat them.
Now that's a strategy right there. I hadn't thought of that one.
Kind of like the, burning your dead. I guess it's like eat your dead instead. It's just eminently practical, right?
What's that?
You and Eliana are also a big fan of that.
Eliana and Ashea are both a big fan of that as well. We're all coming together in a place we would not have expected.
No,
Yay,
not really.
team cannibalism.
What is who says men are meat? I mean, Euron
yes,
says that.
That line does come up a few times. Euron says it, and someone else says it too. I think it's Anyway, well, what about you, Joe? How do you feel about these creeping, terrifying northern themes?
Well, yeah, I think it's quite obvious that the overall theme for the North in this book is just death. That's how you can blanket it across the board. And you get that right from the beginning. Varamir, his whole prologue is about a man dying. All of the prologues die, but normally they don't know it. Whereas his entire chapter is about dying and how he's going to tackle that or avoid it or whatever else. And then it basically just goes from there for the rest of the book. Everything else, apart from Davos, and even he is kind of touch and go at certain points. Everyone else is really trying to stay alive the whole time or trying to kill someone else. And it's a real, I think it highlights Jon in a way. Everyone else is going to war and they want to go and kill someone, whereas Jon is literally the only person just trying to save people. So he's got this big waterfall of not only everything at Castle Black and the others coming for him, but everyone behind him on the other side is still fighting and still trying to kill each other as well. And he's the only one. So maybe we should keep as many people alive as possible, and it's a bit of an uphill climb for him.
Well said. Yeah, that's a good point. I think I didn't really think about it that way. I mean, I definitely perceived that Jon is trying to hold it all together, but I never phrased it that way, that he's the only one. He's working on saving people while everyone else is thinking about who they can kill or get one over on. That's and that is kind of an overarching theme of the story, right? That humanity is too busy with itself and its petty squabbles to deal with this problem, and nowhere is that perhaps more present than at the Wall itself. The place that's supposed to be the front lines of defense is one of the least organized and focused places in the story right now. It's the most chaotic and up in the air, and perhaps the most unpredictable. Nina, what do you think about the all this stuff?
Yeah, so a lot of things to think about. No, one of the things that I was thinking about was when you were kind of mentioning, Arya isn't there, but the name of Arya is there. And one of the things that connects almost every single plotline that happens in the North is how strong the legacy of House Stark is.
Yeah.
This is a book that really emphasizes that you don't get to 8,000 years of rulership and not have people be loyal to you. Like this is not just the ruling dynasty. This is the dynasty. This is the one that people love, the one that people want to restore. And so this is, almost every Northern plotline is focusing on the fact that it's the name of the Starks. It's the legacy of House Stark that people want back, that people will fight and die for. And on a personal level too, Jon is obviously not, taking up arms to restore the Starks, but at the end of the book, he's making a choice precisely because he is a Stark in all but name, because he does know the Starks, because he loves the Starks. He is one of them. He can't let someone else have Winterfell and have the Starks. It belongs to the Starks. So, the loyalty to House Stark is something that is very much a focus throughout A Dance with Dragons, and it's only going to get stronger in the Winds of Winter.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, the convergence of Stark heirs is something that you and I talked about a little bit. You drew my attention more to it, and how there's just this great undertone. There's this, as Joe pointed out, and Lady Gwyn and everybody, this death theme is so huge, but there is this Stark rulership theme and the Stark heir theme going on behind. Maybe not theme isn't the right word, but various plot lines. Rickon being supported by Davos and Wyman, Sansa, Littlefinger, and Arya the heir, which technically isn't really come up that much in this book, but it's certainly happening. Arya isn't really there, but her name is being used, as we've said. Robb's will hasn't really come up that much lately, but we've been bringing it up from time to time because we know it's out there and it's probably going to be relevant. And with Jon being stabbed, that might be the vehicle for him to be out of his vows, etc. So that's 4 right there. And meanwhile, Bran Stark is still there, and he's arguably more ticketed to a crown than anyone else, if we can believe the show even a little bit. So that's a lot of important stuff happening, and just as chaotic as the North is, you wonder how this is all going to work itself out. Like Starks aren't going to fight each other directly, but people might fight in their name. And Arya would be like, "Don't fight over me," but she's in Bravo, she doesn't even know this is happening, right? So what people will do in someone else's name isn't the same as what the Starks would do to each other, and that's an unfortunate tragedy here that could cause some consternation for us readers later. But that's a really important thing to point to and to be aware of, this whole Stark heir business that's going on behind it all. Okay, so let's move over to Slaver's Bay. Let's talk Slaver's Bay. Actually, let's do our mid-roll here. Let's do some mid-roll shout-outs because we've been going for about an hour. We'll probably go for a grand total of roughly 2:15 to 2.5. That tends to be how long we do with these wrap-ups, but I feel like Slaver's Bay will take us a little while. So let's get this done first. Looks like a couple super chats have popped up. Maura Lee says, just a show of love and support and much appreciation. Love all you guys and the kitties. Well, thank you very much, Maura. We've been trying to get more photos of the stray cats that are around our house and post those in our various social media groups, because with the weather warming up, we love to take pictures of the neighborhood cats. We are lucky enough to have a neighborhood where they can hang out and be safe. So that's cool. Anna Toledo sends a super chat and says, looking forward to watching later. Valar Rereadis has been the highlight of my week since the beginning. Thank you for the amazing content. Well, we appreciate you sticking with us, Anna. We've had so much fun doing it, and there is more to come. And a super chat from Glenn Thrasher. No message, just a show of support. Thank you, Glenn. Maester Thrasher over there. And shout out to Lady Coley of the Island Long, who is a big supporter and requested a shout out, and I am happy to oblige. And if I could just get me just a second here, I need to pull up my other page here. Having internet problems here. Not, well, anyway. More like this in, I'm having keyboard problems is what I'm having. Okay, just a second. Dead air. Here we go. Okay. I had neglected to grab this, and I thought I did. Okay, so we have our Blood Riders. Thank you to our Blood Riders. Koholkoi, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a Dragonbone Bow. Kokavo the Tamer, wielder of the Wildfire Whip. Gehenna, as well as our... what are they called? Queens of Love and Beauty. From the depths of Fleabottom, Lord Carrie of... I did that again, didn't I? I always say it's been a while since I've called Ken Carrie, but it happens every once in a while. From the depths of Fleabottom, Lord Ken of Househammer is declared for Queen Carrie, Fire of the North, who recovered Dark Sister from beyond the wall. That's why we need that Mira POV to fill in that extra storyline there. And a laurel of glory in the name of love to Bud of House Beresford, Knight of Tolkien and Arbiter of Scotch, from Sandy the Dragon, Blood of Queen Daenerys, and Lady of Jameson. Hope you all are doing well out there with things changing. I think things are looking up in 2021 so far. Hopefully it stays that way. And whatever happens, you will have more of your Song of Ice and Fire community to provide you with content. Not just us, but people who aren't here, and as well as our excellent and lovely guests. All three of them put out great content, and I believe you can expect that to continue. Okay, let's get back to it. Slaver's Bay. What's interesting to me is there's quite a lot more obvious focus on Slaver's Bay in this book. Of the last 18 chapters, something like 10 of them take place in Slaver's Bay. And of course, there's a lot of POVs that start off either there or heading there. Tyrion goes by far the most locations in this book, not even close. Even Theon is probably the next most locations, but he goes to Pentos, the Flatlands, the Rhoyne, several spots along the Rhoyne, Selhoris, Volantis. He sails near Valyria and drifts in the Gulf of Grief. Then he goes to Meereen and is in Daznak's pit. Then he's part of the siege. He goes to the Second Sons. He's just all over the place. He's a regular Lomas Longstrider. Daenerys, of course, starts in Meereen, stays in Meereen until Daznak's pit, then goes to Dothraki Sea. Barristan basically takes over her POV. He becomes our eyes in Meereen after she's gone, and Quentyn sort of dies right around that same time. And then Victarion, who doesn't arrive yet, is on his way. He arrives basically at the beginning of the Winds of Winter, if the pre-release chapters are accurate or aren't changed later. And with him is, of course, Makoro, who is pretty important, most likely, for Daenerys' future, although I don't know exactly how. So that's pretty cool. And then to parallel with these themes we talked about in the North, we have a lot of the same things. We have a lot of this underground / dungeons theme, where we're seeing stuff happening below ground. The dragons being held underground for so long is a big plot line, with them being released at the end as sort of a climactic moment. We have the same parallel of being among the dead. Death is everywhere. The Stone Men with Grayscale. We have the Pale Mare is apocalyptic. We have hellish results at places like Astapor, like almost literal hell. We have themes of the freaking apocalypse, the Four Horsemen. I mean, what's his death more than that? Well, along with, plague and famine and the other, whatever the other four horsemen are. And so instead of winter, basically the one thing missing from all this is winter. Although we do have a little of that with Daenerys seeing the grass change in the Dothraki Sea. So what I think we're replacing with the main replacement theme for winter is dragons. The heat and fire and dragons is the main replacement theme, whereas most everything else is the same. You even have the starvation theme. You even have cannibalism. You have human sacrifice. All these things are there. They're presented differently. They play out differently. But if you boil them down to their roots, there you can find a lot to tie them together. So similar questions that I asked y'all with regards to the North. Which of these plot lines or POVs are you most looking forward to, and which of these themes stood out to you the most, or just whatever you want to say about the Slaver's Bay plotline. You don't have to directly answer my questions. I just want to hear you guys wax intelligently about Slaver's Bay. This time, we'll start with Nina this time.
Yeah. No, I have written a little bit on this of late, and I think, you know, something that I've come to believe about the Daenerys storyline specifically, and it's a little bit carried over, I guess, into the Barristan storyline, but specifically with the Daenerys storyline in Meereen, is that there's really kind of two key takeaways, and that's, the one is, you can't make peace with slavers. You just can't do it. You cannot make peace with slavers. It will never work. You cannot, I know you brought up multiple times in sort of the reread, you can't compromise between no slavery and slavery, because any compromise involves some slavery. Yeah. So there's just no making peace. It's something that you just have to destroy. And the other part of that, and the part that goes along with that, is Daenerys spends the book thinking, if I'm going to be Misa, if I'm going to be mother to these people and queen to these people, I can't be the mother of dragons, because dragons are destructive. What I think the lesson of Meereen is, no. In order to be Misa, you have to be mother of dragons. Those are two sides of the same coin. Those are both aspects of your personality. You using your dragons to destroy slavery is the best way for you to protect these people. That is the absolute best way. So kind of those two, I think, are very key takeaways, not just for what she does in Meereen, but I think what she's going to do going forward, especially with the others. I think those are very key lessons she needs to learn when she engages with the others.
And I think it's a great segue to point out the others, because I think, morally speaking, it can be a conundrum for some folk to consider that the correct answer, it's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around, that the correct thing is to kill a bunch of people. With the others, it's not hard to wrap your mind around that, because they're not people. They're not human. So it's like, yeah, destroy all those dead things. Like, that's easy to, morally speaking, ethically, it's like, yeah, definitely do that. One of the definitely Daenerys destroying slavery is one of the more impassioned topics that we got answers from, emails from, and things that weren't questions that I can't just relay them directly. But a lot of you wrote in, I want to acknowledge that, to point out that, you know, you've had interesting thoughts on Daenerys, valid thoughts on Daenerys, and if our innocence going to be killed if slavery is destroyed, and those are valid concerns. So if you want to build on that, either Lady Gwyn, feel free, or if you have you want to take this Slaver's Bay conversation in a different direction, go for it. I'd love to hear from you either way.
Okay. Just want to say it's more of a general thing, that what I focus on with these characters, and I think probably all of them to some degree, is their growth as leaders, their leadership arcs. Obviously Daenerys and Barristan and Tyrion, you see, well, I mean, Tyrion's not really in a position of leadership, but he has been in one, and he's poised to be in one again. You definitely see these sort of inner struggles. Victarion, to a lesser extent, I mean, he's leading supposedly on behalf of his brother, and Quentyn, same thing. He's, you know, leading a group of men on behalf of someone else. But kind of just as a general theme, that's something that strikes me about all this. So pretty different from what you guys were talking about. But...
So, like, would you say it's bad leadership, Mesley, or just leadership, or growing into leadership? And because you're growing into leadership, that necessitates some growing pains. Like, few people are expert leaders from the get-go. So how would you qualify that? Like, this is bad leadership, or expected? Like, maybe you give them some some a little leeway because they don't have experience, or
Maybe
how do you feel about
growth
that?
points. They're definitely all growing. I mean, even Barristan, who's quite a mature man and has lots of life experience, he's never done, and he thinks a lot about how he's not very well suited for this sort of thing that's being expected from him now, and so I guess, but they're all, none of them are particularly tremendous at it. They do all see some growth, which is something that you want to see over the course of a book. So
that's a really good point. It implies we're actually going to come back to that topic somewhat because I think it really well applies in other locations as well. It's a good sort of overarching theme for the books. I'm really glad you brought that up. And Joe, how would you discuss Slaver's Bay or summarize your thoughts of Slaver's Bay as much as possible here?
Well, I'll give you an answer in two halves. To speak to what you were saying about the similarities to the North and how they mirror each other, not just through Daddy and John, but in the actual things that are happening. I think the main difference is in the North, they're fighting against something, or they're starting to fight against something that's inevitable. It's a force of nature, and that winter has come and changed everything. There's still politics involved, but it's coming now. It's going to come even faster. Whereas in Marine, although you can argue the dragons are something uncontrollable or something like the Pale Mare, really it's about what humanity is willing to do to each other. And you see that there's just an extra layer of cruelty. Despite all the cruelty we've already seen in the first 4 books, it just seems to step up a level, and they're just more willing to go that. It's what Skahaz is willing to do, what the Harpies do, like breaking the cellist's fingers before they kill her and stuff like that. They make a sport out of killing, for example. It's just another step up, and I think you can see how much that wears on someone like not just Daenerys, but that's who we have access to, and you can see her just looking around and kind of thinking, this is really stupid. Why do people do this? It doesn't make any sense, but it's so ingrained in the culture and the history that they don't kind of blink an eye. That's just how it's always been. So she comes along and makes this massive, great big change and kind of hits pause for a second, and they start making, like we said, these compromises and start packing together what they call a peace and a deal. But even by the time we're not even at the end of the book, kind of like 3/4 of the way through, you can just see it ticking back over a little bit, and you can see these little things start to slip through. But she's been persuaded, well, you've got to let that go, or this can't happen, and you've got to let that go, or this can't happen. We've got to have the fighting pits, etc., etc. I think, like I said at the beginning, Slaver's Bay just stuck out more to me this time, the whole Marine plot. And it's got this sense of inevitability. It will just happen again. It's just a cycle. And you see it when Daenerys leaves, and Skahaz still wants to hurt people, and the Harpies still come back. So whatever you do, like Nina was saying, that you can't compromise. And the other part of it is, hit the other part. I already said it. Ignore me.
Well said. That was really good, Joe. Great job. I was thinking about, as you're saying that, there's a line that jumps out. One person actually asked us, like, what's some of the, and I forget, since I'm thinking of this out of sequence from where I have it in my notes, so I apologize. I can't think of who asked this question, but the question was, what do we see from these characters as far as their first lines? Like, what are some of the first and last lines of the chapters that really stood out? Because that's something we kind of paid a lot of attention to, especially the first lines. And the line that you made me think of just now is Selyse saying, "Let them die," and at the beginning of Jon's final chapter. And she's talking about free folk, including children. And that is cruel. Jon thinks of it as cruel, but there's a strong argument that it is the correct move, because there's just no saving those people at this point. Whereas what you're saying, it's even crueler in Slaver's Bay, because where Selyse is just saying, look, it would be crueler if we tried. She's not aggressively making those kids suffer. She's not the reason they're suffering. Whereas your point in Slaver's Bay is that the children who are suffering in Slaver's Bay are suffering because of the actions of other people, not because of winter or the others, which is, Selyse is like, well, this is not our fault. We didn't cause that, which is callous and cruel, but it's definitely not as bad as inflicting that harm on the children in the first place, which we certainly can't pin that on Selyse.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I did remember. I did have a second part. I know I did. It was in there
good.
Somewhere.
Excellent.
I took it out.
Fire away.
I was going to reply to what Nina said about so there is no compromise, and maybe you do have to do bad things. And I think that's what the dragons represent, especially at the beginning, where so Isaiah dies. That's it for Daenerys. Okay, one child has died. That's enough. We have to lock them away. Drogon's already gone, so that can't be helped. And that changes her whole path through the rest of the book. She says, no, 1 million people, whatever it is, that's not worth one child's death. We can't have that anymore, which is perfectly sane path to take. But I think what we're going to find as we go forward through the series, especially for Daenerys and with these dragons, is that they're going to have to bear the weight of having to do bad things to do good things. They're going to have to hurt people. People are going to have to suffer. In this situation is a great example. And not just them, but probably over in King's Landing and probably up at the Wall. And it's just going to have to be done if you want the end result. And they're going to have to take on that it's a form of self-sacrifice. They're going to have to stand up and say, yeah, I am willing to do that to my soul and become a slightly evil person to help people. And maybe I'll be remembered as evil and many families will hate me. Examples. I don't think that's just for Daenerys. I think that's probably going to be for Jon as well, and almost anyone in a role of responsibility, especially as winter comes. But I think that's what the dragons represent, because we love them. They're cool. They're dragons. We want to read about dragons. But they're also actually quite bad and dangerous, and they do bad things. And you have to have kind of both in one.
A line that I find myself coming back to a few times in A Dance with Dragons, and well, not just A Dance with Dragons, but this is currently most relevant. That very much relates to what you were just saying, Joe. Is Corin Halfhand saying that our honor is nothing compared to lives. Our honor is coin to be spent for the realm, and that's very much what you're saying here. Is like, yeah, some people have to step up and sacrifice their souls. They have to become traumatized or bear this burden to save the world or to save parts of the world. I think of since George is such a fan of Lord of the Rings, I think of Frodo. Like the ring screwed him up, right? Like internally, it messed him up. It affected his soul, for lack of a better word. And I think we're going to see a lot of, for those characters who survive the series, there's going to be a lot of Frodos, a lot of people who are just a little bit damaged. That's maybe not the right word, but they have a lot of suffering, a lot of burden to carry through based on what they've been through. And they did it for other people. Very good, very good. Let's talk about the South, because some of these same things exist there. The South isn't as well developed in this plot, in this book, because it's not as thoroughly addressed. It's like Nina said, it's more of like a little add-on to what was started in Feast in some cases. But still, some of these things are there. Ario Hota and Sunspear, Nina brought up, it's kind of confusing to see what's going on there. I totally agree with that. It's hard to perceive how it's going to get from point A to point B, even if I think we can guess where things will end up in some places. How they get there and who survives is just really impenetrable to me at this point. Cersei, of course, is set down, but you can really get the sense that she's about to rise again, more fiercely, like a phoenix almost, with Gregor at her side. And then Jaime unites with Brienne. So these POVs have all kind of come together. I guess the Hota isn't really coming together with them, but clearly the Dornish plot wraps up with the King's Landing plot hugely, and you can see that heading in that direction. Obviously, Arianne is heading to meet with Aegon and Jon Connington at the beginning of the next book, and their enemy, the one Doran Martell and the Sand Snakes are after, is the Lannisters. So that you can, the connections are pretty straightforward. So what I'd like to talk about with some of these characters is relating some of these same themes, if you'd like to, but mostly I'd just like to get your takes on what you thought of the Southern plotlines in general before we move on to a related topic, which will be what was the point narratively of some of these new POVs. And so that's going to include Jon Connington, but also Barristan and Quentyn and things like that. So this time we'll start with Lady Gwyn. What do you think about Dorne and King's Landing and Jaime and Brienne and Jon Connington and all that?
Oh boy, that's
a big bite to take off.
How many hours do we have?
Let's just all sit back and relax and let Lady Gwyn take it for the next 2 hours.
Well, Ario Hota, I mean, his presence there is he's really almost like a hinge between Feast and Winds, the Dornish plot, because you got the Dornish plot really started moving in Feast. Well, it was introduced with POVs there in Feast, and then there are those. It's set to become a big thing although obviously it's going to take a back seat to some larger things in Winds. And in fact, George moved 3 chapters of 3 Dornish POV chapters off from Dance to Winds. And I think he just kept that one Area Hota chapter in there just to kind of keep the footprint there, to keep that connection, to remind us that this is what's happening, to set up. It's really very much about a setup. You get, that sort of family meeting where he gives everybody their marching orders and everybody's going off in a different direction. And it's really, without getting into where they're going to be going in the Winds of Winter, it is really hard to
yeah. He's a nice contrast to Barristan too, isn't he? Like these bodyguard, older, experienced bodyguard figures.
Yep. Watching, doing his duty always, he's a little slightly more wooden than Barristan, but
we don't know we don't know nearly as much about him. He is
a little bit.
That last line in his chapter, "Simple vows for simple men," is really just, yep, you really are kind of simple. And I don't mean that negatively. Like, that guy just isn't very troubled.
Yeah, we should get used to him because he's going to be our point of view for Dorne and Doran for the Winds of Winter.
However long,
Arianne seems like she's going to be off in the Stormlands. So, for as long as he lasts, as long as it takes, and I would hazard a guess that we're going to get anything that we're ever going to learn about Starfall and the Danes is going to come from Area Hota. So
yeah, he's an important vehicle. Another interesting.
Learn to love him.
Yeah. Another interesting aspect about him tying into Barristan as a bodyguard character is with Cersei's plot line and how she acquires this new bodyguard who really is going to change her outlook on life, and how she sort of transitions from Jaime, the golden son, to this dark shadow of stone that has been foreshadowed since book 1. Nina, what do you think about, do you have thoughts on how these southern plot lines tie into the northern plot lines, or do you just have different thoughts on these things in general? I'd like to hear your takes.
Well, I always have thoughts, but
yeah.
One thing I always thoughts. No, I think what's interesting is, especially in Dance, because King's Landing is such and Dorne, but even more so King's Landing is such a focal point in Feast, and then it sort of definitely takes a back seat in Dance. But as it kind of becomes, a little bit of a focus toward the end of the book, and what's very clear is that everything is imploding for King's Landing on every single front. So you've got, and that really is with a lot of these southern storylines. You have Aegon and Jon Connington who are coming up from the south. You have Arianne who is coming up almost certainly to support Aegon. You have Doran, who's very explicitly, going against the Baratheon Lannister regime. You have the Riverlands, who is, definitely not. Things are not going well for the Baratheon Lannister regime there. In the north, you have Stannis, who is almost certainly gonna win in Winterfell, and then of course Daenerys is in the east, and they know about that. So everything on every single front. King's Landing is really just kind of imploding, and so that really sets up for it's sort of a little bit of what we were talking about with Winterfell, and that everyone is converging there, but where Winterfell is the place where everyone, I think, is going to converge to withstand winter and to fight back and to make a stand and live. King's Landing is the place where everyone's gathering to implode, and everything's kind of going wrong there.
That's really good. Yeah, I think this. You also see the topic Lady Gwyn brought up here as well, with the idea of bad leadership. Like, pretty much all these characters we named exhibited, except maybe Hota, because he's not a leader, exhibited bad leadership. Cersei, okay, we don't even need to get into that. We've been over her bad leadership choices ad nauseum. Kevin, similar. Like, Kevin, he's not a bad leader, but he's made some particularly bad choices amidst some solid choices. Jaime just leaves his army. Just walks off by himself to go with Brienne, which as readers we're all for it, but his commanders are like, what the hell, man? What? You can't do that. and Connington, like, this dude is carrying a deadly disease around that he's concealing from everyone. I mean, what kind of leadership is that? So it's, you could see, like, that definitely supports your point of things imploding. Either you could see them heading towards implosion for very straightforward reasons, multiple straightforward reasons, even if those implosions haven't yet happened yet. So that's really good. So we'll get into even more of that as we approach the end. Joe, what do you think about all this business? What grabs your attention in the South?
So much does. I'm just glad they're involved in dance, that they were included, because I love Feast so much. So anything I can get, even these 1 or 2 chapters on top of Feast storylines, I will take it, because I want to find out more about all of that. But I think the similarities to what else is going on is not only the convergence and the leadership, like you said, but everywhere is going through a transfer of power at the moment, which is always a really dodgy time. So we already had it in the north, and the Boltons have come in, and now they might get knocked out. We'll have it on Castle Black, we assume, if however long Jon's out. We've obviously seen it in Meereen. Now we've had Cersei's already been taken down by the time we get to these chapters, and what we'd really like is to see the how everything she did is kind of fixed, and we don't really get to see it. We're told about it in the epilogue, but we don't get to see it as much as I would like. But then we know that's only temporary anyway, because we all assume Aegon's going to come in, and then maybe Dany arrives as well. So there's always going to be these transfers of power, and King's Landing is probably the worst place for that, even though it's the center of power, just because everyone is out for each other. So like Neil was saying, it can implode probably quicker than anywhere else, because it's just built like matchsticks, the structure of it. And I think that's probably what we're going to see. And you kind of have these people like Cersei, she's finally gained her stick, so to speak. She's been waiting her whole life she'd hoped it was Jaime, and it never really turned out to be. He wouldn't quite do what he was told. Now she's actually got one, so we'll see how she's going to use that, and it'll probably hasten the implosion, if we're honest. And then, like you say, Jaime's just kind of swirling around in the middle and doing his own thing, which, as you say, we are all for and we really like. But eventually you figure he's going to have to kind of come back off holiday and rejoin the main plot and see what the aftermath is, and how is he going to react to that. And yeah, I'm very, very interested. I'm very, very interested in Central Westeros at the moment.
Jaime, get back home and strangle your sister.
By the way, Joe you said that it was King's Landing is like it was built on matchsticks, but it's also almost literally built on matchsticks, because it does have wildfire.
Yes, there is
green matchsticks.
Easy strike matches. That's really well said, Joe. I want to pivot a little bit to what you said that also touches on this leadership theme. Is it's the idea of who's really in charge, right? Like Dany is the queen of Meereen, but so much that she wanted wasn't happening. So much pushback she's getting. As soon as she's gone, Hizdahr tries to take over. It doesn't go very well. Same with Cersei in King's Landing. Who's really in charge? Is it the Tyrells? Mace is trying to take over. Is it the High Sparrow in the north? Jon is in charge of the wall, but his officers aren't cooperating, etc. Obviously, killing him is a pretty strong pushback against his leadership. Who's really, the Boltons and Stannis are fighting. So there's a lot of things in flux that way, and that we could call that a theme as well. So let's talk about. Go ahead.
So to just add on to that, what you're saying there is, so Jon has a thought at some point where he thinks about the Night's Watch as an institution, and he thinks like, oh, we could really do with Donal Noy and Jill Mormont and Benjen Stark, and we haven't got them because they've all died, and we're left with Bowen Marsh, and off we are. And the same thing is happening everywhere else, especially, and you can see it best in somewhere like King's Landing, where so many people have died or have gone off for other reasons or whatever. And if you keep taking off the top, you're left with people who aren't ready, aren't experienced or good enough to rule. And obviously that's what people like John Connington and the Golden Company and Varys are banking on, in that you have these people that should not be in the positions they are at the worst possible time, like in Castle Black.
Ooh, yeah. Great point. Yeah. Actually, that is a great pivot to, I'll jump ahead to a question we got, which is, let's see, let me find the good wording here. The rise of powerful women as a theme. It was something raised by Archmaester Rennie here. And I'd say that it's a theme that's starting. I wouldn't say we're there yet, because there's a lot of women that are on the rise that maybe haven't fully taken power yet. Sansa being an example. Cersei's going to take more power than she had, probably, is my guess. But there are certainly several who have already taken power, like Lady Stoneheart did, but that was not this book. But really, I would say that relates to what you were saying, Joe. It's because of so much of it relates to people dying. The men mostly go off to war. That's in a patriarchal society who was in charge in the first place. A lot of them don't come back. A lot of them are killed because, frankly, they take their sons with them. So the sons aren't left behind to rule either. So the women rule, which gives things a different look. And those women get experience, which is another point you raised, Joe, is that experience of leading is huge. And once you have the experience of leading, once people see you as an authority figure, that can be strong enough to overcome the patriarchal system. And like, so a lot of these women will still find themselves in position of leadership because that's what worked out. It worked, it functioned, and they're going to keep going, especially if the lord of the house was killed or something like that. When there's sons who aren't old enough to go to war, well, they're not old enough to rule either. So this enables that to happen, and it shows that these women are pretty capable, at least some of them. And so let's continue on that theme while we're at it. Let's go to Lady Gwyn. What do you think? You wrote some. Looks like you have some great thoughts on this from what I can see in the notes here.
Well, I did. I wrote. I'm glad you brought it up because I wrote my senior thesis on this topic.
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
I just looked in my desk drawer. I got an award.
Well, then we're all ears, even more so.
A long time ago, though. but it was it's definitely a very interesting topic about when you think about society during wartime and what happens socially, not just who won what battle, but it all of those things happen. Women have to take up roles that they might not have normally taken up, and they may end up having very significant roles in society, in leadership, but it doesn't usually lead to a sea change. Interestingly enough, it's more like 2 or 3 steps forward, and then maybe 1 or 2 or 2.5 steps back. It's incremental change in real life. In Westeros, though, who knows? Because this is a fantasy world, and I'm sure that George is aware of this sort of trend in human history, and maybe he'll make it more, more shiny or more decisive in his own world. He can do whatever he wants in terms of social history. Mm-hmm. There's certainly going to be plenty of opportunity for female leaders making significant contributions to the narrative going forward, starting here and going forward, much more so than in previous volumes, especially the first 3, where it was the War of the Five Kings, and it was just men making decisions and fighting battles. Other than Catelyn.
Yeah, I was about to say Catelyn's out there going stop, and then we get women like exactly. Lady Smallwood, who is perhaps my favorite example of this early concept of a non-POV character, her being both a leader and tender to Arya at the same time, and that's really that's not in this book, but I can't help but think of her. Nina, what do you think about this subject?
Yeah, well, one of the things, and I know I've talked to you about this, is just kind of as an off thing, is one of the things George R. R. Martin I think really, really enjoys writing is writing smart, sassy, confident older women and widows. Like, he just really enjoys writing that. So you see that with people like Barbary Dustin and Widow of the Waterfront, and to some extent Lady Smallwood, and even Lady Mertens in the Winds of Winter preview chapter. He really enjoys, and obviously the Queen of Thorns obviously enjoys these sorts of ladies. So to that extent, I think he would always want to have powerful ladies, especially if they were older ladies, because he just finds that really fun to write. But no, I think that because I've focused, and I've said this probably 100 times now on this stream, because I've focused so much on Daenerys, it's something that I really look forward to going forward, is that I tend to see a lot of the endgame stuff is really centering on Daenerys, and not even so much in a political context, but almost more in an apocalyptic context. Daenerys really is the one. Daenerys is kind of the center of it all, and it's great that in this story it's the woman, it's this young girl who is the one who can save the world. It's her. She is at the center of it all. She is the one who can, who has the dragons, who has the ability to literally save all of humanity. So it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, that's a neat neat kind of not inversion maybe of Utaka. He loves to write these sassy, older, powerful women, and Daenerys is probably not going to become an older woman. Certainly not in the timeline of this book. But that is she's maybe the younger version of that in some ways. And I had another thought, but I've lost it. So Joe, let's hear from you on this.
Did we lose Joe?
Joe? Okay. Well, we'll have to move on, and we've got plenty of other questions.
He just left the ladies to talk about the ladies.
He didn't feel appropriate to weigh in. He's like, enough said. Okay, well, let's talk about the point of some of the new POVs then. That was another question we got from several people. There's the 4 main POVs that are new, really. I'm not counting Varamir or Kevin since they died, and I think it's a little easier to see what the point of their POVs are, is to just give us a little more information and to set some things up. Certainly, if you want to weigh in on Kevin or Varamir, go ahead. But let's start with Lady Gwyn. Melisandre, Barristan, Quentyn, Jon Connington. Do you have any notable thoughts on what the purpose of these characters was? I think people most are curious about Quentyn. I think he's the one that people say, what's the point of Quentyn? Since he dies and the rest of these characters, it's maybe premature to say what the point of them is, and if we haven't seen their whole arc. But I'd like to hear any of your thoughts have on any of those 4.
Well, I mean, the essential thing about both Melisandre, Barristan, and Jon Connington is going to be that they're there to fill a void when Dany, Jon, and Tyrion are no longer there to give their point of view. I mean, so Jon, we presume, is maybe going to be out of commission for a bit, and so we have to have Melisandre there. Dany's no longer Marine. We had to have Barristan there. Jon Connington takes over from Tyrion as the point of view to Aegon, and that whole plot, that whole storyline was, introduced in Tyrion, but he goes off to do his thing, so it had to move to him. Quentyn is an outlier, and why do we have Quentyn? I mean, it's a very, very good question. I'm not sure I'm fully qualified to answer that question, because I struggle with that myself. So I will defer to maybe one of my fellows here if you guys have better ideas about.
Okay, is Joe back?
Joe's back.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Back from my hourly timeout.
We didn't. You weren't gone too long. You only missed out on one answer, but we'll just move forward to this one. What do you think the point of Quentyn is? The point of his arc?
Well, this is actually a question I asked right at the beginning when we first got Quentyn's first chapter. I can't remember which one that's called, but I struggled to figure out at the beginning. I asked the question, if he wasn't in it, what massively changes plot-wise? And okay, the dragons don't get out, but that you could very, very easily get them out by other means. Still Tattered Prince, anyone else. There's no shortage of candidates in Marine. So I think what George is trying to do narratively is, I can't remember if I said this at the time, but I think Quentyn is like a remnant of Feast, where last time he said that Feast was George's like love letter. He kind of let himself go a bit and said, I'm not going to stick to the plot too much. I'm going to actually do what I like. And he's kind of doing the same thing with Quentyn, but he's slotted him into the plot okay. And what he's doing is writing about adventure and story and the hero, and everyone gets to be the hero in their own story and that kind of thing. And he's doing that because he wants to show that isn't going to happen in this story, which is not news to us. We already know, because that's kind of the selling point of Ned's death, and that's still very much the USP for Game of Thrones in a lot of ways for many people. So it's not like it's new, but I think he's trying to say that even as we get to the end here, this isn't going to go the way you're hoping it is. Okay, maybe you don't care about Quentyn that much. He's completely new to us. Basically, we only have him for 4 chapters, or he does appear in more. But I'm giving this to you as a signal that even as we get forward, even as we get further and further, and you care about these characters way more than you ever cared about Ned, because you've had them for longer and they've done more, they're still not going to end up where you like. And there's probably a reason that Quentyn ties the chapter before Jon does, because he's saying, see, I told you, look, I warned you right here, 1 chapter before, these characters will die, that it's not the story you think it is. And watch me prove it, because here goes Jon dying. Now, I think John's going to come back, so I don't know if they kind of shoot themselves in the foot with that message, but you
hey,
get what I'm
there's some
saying.
people that think Quentin's coming back. I don't think any of us are among that group, but yeah. I'd also, before getting Nina's answer, I'll add in something that I thought is maybe worth discussing as well as a possible answer to this question. What the point of Quentin is that quite possibly we've talked about an overarching theme with Daenerys that's already happening and will probably continue to build. It happened with Robb Stark as well. It's happening more so with Daenerys, is that there's a lot of rumor about her, and the vast majority of it is false. The whole, like, she feeds her dragons children, and this is, the death of Quentin is already shaping up. If you look at the way Gareth Drinkwater talks about it immediately afterwards, there's a lot of bitterness over this. There's a lot of blaming of Daenerys, which is kind of ridiculous because even Gareth knows that Daenerys wasn't even there. Daenerys didn't tell you to go into the dragons cave there and try to steal them. That wasn't smart. How are you going to blame her for that? That doesn't matter. The fact that it's unfair to blame her, we can all recognize that. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Daenerys' enemies are going to love to spin whatever they can about her. Anything they can sink their teeth into that makes her look worse, that makes her look evil, they're going to do that. And especially if Varys and Dany end up on opposite sides of things. Right now, I think that's tentative, the way that's going to go. But I think eventually it's not going to go well. And Varys is a master of this sort of thing, of driving wedges between allies. That's what Barristan thinks about in his last chapter. Varys' job was dividing the crown's enemies. And then in the prologue, or in the epilogue, that's exactly what we see him doing by killing Kevin. So I think that a very strong oncoming theme is people having false information about Daenerys, and I think that's could be a very big part of this is her being blamed for Quentin's death and Dornish anger towards that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Go ahead.
Wait. No, well, I was going to speak to a different point in terms of the we were talking about POVs, and I think you had mentioned Barristan as sort of this, what's the point of kind of this new POV?
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I very strongly believe in, more and more, the more I reread, the more I believe this is, Barristan, I like his arc, even though it's a short arc in Dance with Dragons. I like his arc because it explores this question of what does it mean to be a Kingsguard? What does it mean to serve a king? And it's a question that I think George R. Martin does a good job in a very short amount of chapters, setting up this question, having him face the challenge, answering the challenge, and then sort of resolving from there of, taking this character who is the epitome of the Kingsguard. He is what people think of when they think of the Kingsguard, and having him struggle with the question of, does being a Kingsguard mean being loyal to the person whose head has the crown on it, or who is in the office, or being loyal to the office itself? What does that mean? It's not easy. So, and putting him in a position where he never felt he could stand up to Aerys, even though Aerys was a tyrant and he thought Rhaegar was a better king. He never felt that he could stand up to Robert, even though he didn't believe that Robert was the rightful king. So 1, 2, 3, now he actually does. And he does what he never thought he could do. He deposes who he thinks is an unlawful king in the name of who he thinks is a lawful queen. So I really like that storyline. I like that even in a very short amount of chapters, we get a nice thematic punch there. So
well said. That's a really good point. Yeah, I'm really eager to see where Barristan's story goes. He's not just for what you say, but because he's just this, like, as we've said a few times during, he's this wonderful opportunity to give us an insight into things that happened 40 years ago or 30 years ago or 20 years ago. He could tell us about Arthur Dayne or Rhaegar, more about Aerys. There's just so many things. But another character he can really speak to is Tywin, and that's a big, important point. But I guess, Lady Gwyn, you wanted to respond to Quentin before I moved on?
Well, I was going to really agree hard with you, because one of the things, we've talked about this a lot in our recent episodes looking at Dorne and the Stormlands, as far as what the perception of Dany will be and how Quentin will play such a huge role in that. You've got to look ahead a bit in the Arianne chapters. She thinks at great length that perhaps Dany actually was behind Viserys's death.
Yeah, she considers
she didn't want to be, stuck living in a tent for the rest of her life, and so she sort of it was instrumental in having her brother murdered. And of course, Dany could take the blame for Drogo's death.
Yeah, that's true.
She literally did kill him. So, there are all these deaths that are going to be following her to Westeros, and we couldn't agree more that that is probably a big part of Quentin's purpose.
After all, I mean, look what they said about Robb Stark. Like, yeah, is it your... When Davos was like, wait, are you saying that Robb Stark turned into a direwolf and ate?
Right.
It's like, they're like, yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
So if people can get away with that story, I mean, damn, what can they say about Daenerys? It's like, they're going to
look at
ooh.
every man she comes in contact with.
Yeah.
Ends up dead.
Yeah, no one can satisfy her.
Just if Dario dies, look out,
Oh gosh, yeah, right. And if she destroys like all of the Dosh Kelleen or whatever, and yeah, it's like, look at her. She killed all the Dothraki. She's so dangerous. So yeah, let's go a little farther with that. Let's talk about some overall themes here. Not all these require a response. I just wanted to kind of touch on these and set a few things up. I want to get deeper into this bad leadership theme. Sometimes the bad leadership theme involves good intentions. Obviously, Dany and Jon and a lot of these characters have very good intentions. It doesn't always, obviously. Like someone like Cersei doesn't really have good intentions with her rulership. She's more about herself. Jon Connington's doing it for Rhaegar's son, but it's debatable, right? It kind of like he's kind of doing it for himself. Like that's a philosophical question, who he's really doing it for. So a question is, so that brings us to a theme of justice versus revenge. With the slavers, is it correct to kill them all? Is that justice or is that a form of revenge? That's a question for you all to think about on your own. Does Dany even truly have a right to the Iron Throne? Her brother imparted her with that sense of justice, but is that really what it is? Is it really justice for her to take the throne back? Same goes for Stannis. So justice versus duty is a theme, and you touched on this, Nina, with talking about Barristan. That's a huge thought process with him, and it's something that's recurred with so many of these different characters that have a strong sense of duty. Areo Hotah counts for that, but more so Jaime, Ned Stark, Jon. Like duty, huge theme there, and that, of course, comes with, it's the main revenge and justice and duty kind of overlap each other, and it's kind of hard to see where one begins and the other ends. And another topic that comes up a lot here, where it's more of an opposite, or at least something that doesn't work together, is duty versus love. And that's a theme we've seen since the very beginning, with Maester Aemon very wisely bringing that up. And we've seen that play out countless times. Here it seems to be a little different, because with Jon, it's a different kind of love. It's not romantic love, it's familial love. And that, in a sense, brings it right back to duty, because Westerosi and in the real world, it's definitely a cultural value to have a duty towards your family. So love and duty kind of do overlap when it becomes a family thing, less so when it's romantic. And then we come back to Tywin. I think it's really interesting how you can take almost every POV, maybe the exception is like Varamir, and draw a line to Tywin's influence on this character, and it's very strong. It's obvious with Tyrion, Cersei, Jaime, Kevin. It's obvious with the ravaging of the Riverlands, the Red Wedding, the sack of King's Landing, which even applies to little characters like Kem, who Tyrion meets amidst the Second Sons, just to remind us that Tywin's legacy is everywhere. Barristan even, of course, with the Duskendale and Aerys, and of course, the killing of the Targaryen Martell princelings was the whole launched Dorne's revenge plot and Connington's plots. So this leadership theme isn't just about the present, it's about the past and how it bleeds into these characters, but perhaps no one more than Tywin is that character. So let's have you guys expand and in any way you want about this leadership theme. Lady Gwyn, you started on it, so we'll come to you last if you want to take a minute to maybe think of some new thoughts. Joe, we'll start with you. Leadership. Let's talk about leadership, duty, justice, all these things, and how that's a major topic of this book. Whatever you want to say.
Well, I think duty is one of the real top themes of the book, just for the strength of Dany and Jon being such large parts of it, and that being that's their job in this book, is to perform a duty. your personal wants and everything else. You have to kill the boy, you have to put your dragons away, you're supposed to have this job and you're supposed to get on with it. And I think what we see, you can almost link it back to Quentyn in a way, because there are different types of duty, or there are different sources of why you're doing it. So for those two, they're doing because they've got these great big important jobs. They're taking care of thousands of people or trying to save the world, whatever it is. Whereas someone like Quentyn, his duty to go and get Daenerys, he's not doing it because he's super invested in revenge on the Lannisters. He really very rarely thinks about that at all. He's not like the Sand Snakes. He's not like Doran. He's not powered by that motivation, at least not as much as the others. He's doing his duty because his dad told him to, essentially, and he's like, this is my thing, and if I go back, Dad will be upset. So it's in no way comparable to what else is going on in the book, and maybe that's why he can't come through at the finish line, because he's not in it as much as these other ones. Whereas these other people, they are really, really invested, like Jon, and he's willing to kill the boy and send away all his friends and put himself, like, it's almost a form of self-harm with both Jon and Daenerys. They're really willing to make their lives worse because they think the end goal will be achieved fast, or this is what you're supposed to do. And then at the end, you get to see the cracks of the cost of that, and you can't actually live that way. And that's something people have said about just the nature of the Kingsguard or the Night's Watch. You can't give everything that is to be human up and still expect to function. And Jon and Dany are finding that out. And especially, I think it's probably more pronounced in Jon at the end, because he has the literal decision of, I can do what I'm supposed to, or I could do what I really want. He chooses one of them, and he tries to sell it as, I'm not breaking any rules. I'm not. If I don't ask anyone else, then it's all fine. When really, we all know he knows that's not on, because that was his very first scene in the series. He was there with Bran. He was there with Ned. It was justice. And so you can ask the question then. So let's say if Ned was still Warden of the North and Jon leaves the Wall, even as Lord Commander, to go and do whatever he wants, then Ned would be honor bound to go and deal with him, and there would be no question about that. That's just the rules, Jon. So that.
Well, he was
Revenge is in there.
There you go. You cut out for just like 3 seconds there.
Oh, I don't know what's going on. My dog's barking too loud for the internet, probably. I was pretty much at the end anyway. You go ahead, Aziz.
Okay, well, that was a really great take. That was excellent points there. Nina, what do you think about this leadership themes? Bad leadership, legacy of leadership, future of leadership? Anything you want to say? We're all ears.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this kind of goes back to what I said at the very, very beginning in terms of, focusing on Jon and Dany, because they have kind of the most explicit and longest discussions in terms of leadership in the whole book. And they both struggle with this question of, how to rule, but for very different reasons. And they both, kind of, to some extent walk away from it at the end, but again, for very different reasons.
Yes.
What Daenerys comes to is that Meereen isn't workable for her because it's not her end goal. She's coming to realize that this is a place she can't stay. She cannot make work because she was never meant to be here. Jon realizes or comes to a belief at the end. The entire book he struggles with being a Lord Commander versus being a son of Ned Stark. And he, increasingly makes decisions that are as much, if not more, the son of Ned Stark than they are the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. And so at the end, when, he's being faced with this question of, are you going to continue to be the leader of the Night's Watch or not? He says no. He says no. I'm walking away from it. I'm going to break my vows, and I'm going to go and be a Stark in all but name again, because that's what matters to me more. So again, it's just kind of an interesting question in terms of, these are both leaders of political institutions, and they both do to some extent walk away, but for very different reasons and different motivations on both of them.
And they're both facing just completely unprecedented challenges without much experience. I think that's so
as
super
teenagers.
important. Yeah, they're teenagers. Yeah. You're right. They're freaking teenagers. Jon at least had a little bit of upbringing towards leadership. Dany didn't even have that, really. She's just completely winging it. And they don't. Neither of them have great advisors. Jon, I guess, sent a few of his good advisors away. But anyway, Lady Gwyn, let's hear from you on this.
Mute.
Oh, there she
I'm
is.
going to unmute myself and then take up another topic that you mentioned, that this legacy of Tywin
Cool.
that I think you're right, looms so hugely over the plot at this point. And you specifically have all the Lannisters that are struggling with it. Jaime has outright rejected it. Cersei is embracing it. Tyrion is trying to escape it, but arguably is the one who's most like Tywin. So,
yeah.
Whether or not he's going to be able to is up for debate. And you've got all these other plot threads, like you identified, that are related to Tywin. And the one that interests me very specifically is John Connington, because of that conversation he has with Blackheart in the Golden Company, or that he remembers. Obviously, we don't see that on page. We see it in his memories, where he's, as he always does, he's running the Battle of the Bells in a loop on his head since the moment it happened. I think that's his particular psyche. And Blackheart tells him that he says Tywin Lannister wouldn't have done anything more, and Blackheart says, "No, you're wrong. Tywin Lannister would have burned the whole town down and killed everybody, and that would have been the end of Robert Baratheon." So as he's played this through his head so many times over the years, I think that this is going to have a huge impact on things that John Connington is willing to do in order to achieve his goals in The Winds of Winter. So the legacy of Tywin will continue to play out, and it's interesting that it's also connected with the reason why he's doing what he's doing. So
It doesn't seem like, let me just get a quick answer from all of you. Doesn't it seem like the guy who's going to burn King's Landing is more likely him than Dany, or that maybe Dany gets blamed for it, or maybe it's an accident. But the guy who seems like is being foreshadowed to intentionally want to burn a city is him, right? He's the guy.
Certainly,
yeah.
Thematically, that's definitely, there's more of it there.
I have thoughts, but that might get more into a Winds of Winter discussion. So.
Right.
But it seems like that was like maybe what the show is sort of getting at with the bells thing. It's like the bells things with her, they're there, but it's mostly like Dothraki bells of victory. It's John is the one who obsesses over what that sound really means. Dany, it's just like a kind of in the background for her. Anyway, Joe, did you have anything to add to that real quick on the?
No, only that you can probably say the same about Tyrion as well. So if he ends up next to Daenerys and she has that kind of force beside her, because you can always tie it back to your question on leadership, where he's the one who had it before and then spends this whole book on kind of a curved U, and is just about getting to maybe where he'll get it again. So what's he going to do with it once he does again? How does his revenge story, and what mindset is he in? And so many questions you could answer. But yeah, you could foresee it. You could see it happening. So
here's a related question that I think a lot of us didn't even consider. It's something that might not matter. It may not come up. But if it does, it could be particularly interesting. It's a question from Julia Rust. Hello from Sweden. What do you think John Connington will think when/if he finds out about Jon Snow's parentage and that Eddard Stark hid him probably to protect him from Robert all those years? So that's a really good question. I think, Nina, you have the simplest answer here, which I think might be the way it goes. So we'll start with that.
Yeah, I don't think John Connington finds out. In fact, I don't think John Connington is long for this world, period. Yeah. So I don't think that John Connington finds out a lot of things. No, and part of that is I kind of expect Arianne to take over as a POV on Aegon. Because I don't really see, having kind of two POVs on the same non-POV character. So I kind of see John Connington dying sooner rather than later. So no, I don't think John Connington ever finds out about Jon Snow. I don't even know that we get more explicit about John Connington finding about Aegon. So that's kind of where I am.
Cool. Okay. What do you think, Lady Gwyn?
Well, I definitely think he sticks around long enough to find out about Aegon. That has got to be the sort of the peak of his arc, where he gets this huge revelation, and then that's his implosion point. But thematically, this is just a huge irony because Connington's been protecting and raising this probably fake kid for all these years, while Ned Stark, who's one of the primary victors of Battle of the Bells, which is the thing that has haunted him for all these years, is protecting Rhaegar's real actual son. And if he were to find this out, it would be absolutely devastating. But I don't think it's necessarily banged on. I think there's only the slimmest of chances that he ever finds out about Jon. However, like I said, I think that the Aegon reveal is going to be the thing that is his ultimate.
It might be a bit much for
kind
him
of
to
his
react to
endpoint.
both of those. But yeah, but it's interesting for sure. Joe, what do you think?
Well, I have to admit, I never even kind of connected the dots. I never even thought about Jon being of any importance to Jon Connington. So this is why I don't try and guess things, because people are much smarter than me can do it for me. But now they've been brought to my attention, I do think if George wants to be particularly really, really cruel just because he can, then the kind of cruelest thing he could do is tell Jon Connington about Jon's existence, but through not with all the right details. So he says, "Oh, Rhaegar did have a son. He survived, and he's called Jon." And maybe Jon Connington thinks, "Oh, the guy I had this unrequited love with, maybe he did feel something back for me because he had this hidden son, and he called him Jon." And then someone says, "No, not you, Jon Arryn," and that's probably what sends him off the edge, because you would, wouldn't you?
That's brilliant. That was come up. That idea came up before. Shay and I talked about that. Where did that?
I was just talking to you.
You just brought that. Shay brought that up before. She had that same idea. I couldn't remember where that came from. Yeah,
He's laughing a lot too.
yeah. That's a real. I love that idea. Just the thought of him, just like making it about him somehow.
Really twist the knife.
His brain might be addled by grayscale by the time this happens too. So like, who knows how his mind's even going to work? Because like that's another whole like twist of this whole thing is like stone men go nuts, right? Their brain is impacted. So like, is that part of what's going to happen with Connington too? I don't know. It's a whole nother ball of wax to consider. Here's a few other questions from folks. Some of these don't require an answer. They're just really good observations that are for us to consider, or for you all to consider as well. Micah Clark, hey there, friend, says Dance has a lot of focus on ruling and loyalty, especially for Jon and Dany, and how they both hate it now that they're in it. A lot of focus on how their subordinates view them. Good point, and that's part of why I liked that early question we tackled, which was what other POVs could help fill some of this out. And that's a great, like, that made me think of this with the Irajiki POV idea, how they view Daenerys would be something that we don't have a lot of. Like, how do people close to Daenerys view her? And that was a good one of the good things to come from this episode, is I hadn't really thought about that very much. Guilty Undertaker says it's too bad that we couldn't get Jon, Cersei, and Dany in one book. 3 very different yet complementary reflections on ruling. Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose by the time the next book rolls around, it'll be it'll be less direct ruling and administration and more battles and war to start off with, and then who knows after that. Now, here's one that's a question I do want to get answers from you all on. At least 2 different people, Guinevere Greenstones and Margot from Discord, asked, what are our thoughts on the title of this book as it pertains to the story? I'll start off with a quick comment. I think it's certainly on the surface a little misleading, but not. Some people think of the Civil War, Dance with Dragons, which maybe there's some foreshadowing for that. Obviously, Dany and Aegon don't come into direct conflict, at least not yet. But perhaps it has more strength thematically, even though we do actually get to see the dragons in action for the first time ever, unless you count the freeing of the Unsullied, which maybe you could count that, but this is a lot more intense and a lot more directed towards our POVs. So this time we'll start with Lady Gwyn. Your notes are first here in the document, so why not start with you?
Well, there's this very, basic thing that it comes up in a Quentyn chapter. Sorry, not Quentyn chapter, Barristan chapter regarding Quentyn. He is watching burned Quentyn dying in Dany's bed, and he thinks not all men are meant to dance with dragons. It's in the Queen's Hands chapter, but obviously it's just George doing that thing where he said the name. This book is a build-up to the second dance, which you referred to. All the build-up for Dany and Aegon eventually meeting is here, and probably originally, or possibly originally, the book was meant to have even more of that stuff in it. And this sort of dragony action, the rise of the dragony action is such a big part of this, with Quentin and obviously with Drogon coming back and instrumental in Dany's disappearance. So
yeah, right on. Lady Joe. I almost called you Lady Joe.
Lady
But
Joe.
you're Sir Buckley, not.
Oh, that's fine by me.
Yeah,
No, I
your
take
wife
it.
is Lady Buckley. What do
Yeah,
you
I think. Well, to be honest, I kind of have got some of the answers from the other questions in this, but I'll kind of give the quick version.
Sure.
Basically, I think the point of the title is. Oh, have I frozen again?
No, you're there.
Nope.
Oh no, okay, sorry, my fault. So you mess with fire, you get burned, basically, and you can look at that on a micro level. We've already said it's a book of consequence and comeuppance, and on the smaller level, that might be Cersei, that might be Theon. But as we said right back at the beginning, you can look at it as society-wide as well, because everyone's kind of been baiting at war and just kind of seeing how far you can push things, whether that's a Roose Bolton or the whole city of Meereen. And eventually it is all going to collapse and come back on you, which it is. The end of this book is basically just everyone flipping the table all at once, and we're going to have absolute chaos on the other side. And or you can take the more literal in, like we said, the actual dragons, they are good, but they're bad. As much as we love them, they're going to bring a lot of... You have to take both at once, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah. Well said. Nina, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of go off of both of those points, which are definitely true. This is a book of the rise of draconic power, which is both literal and sort of figurative in terms of the rise of these two Targaryen, or purporting to be, in the case of Aegon, Targaryen pretenders. They are both actively taking leadership roles and are actively asserting themselves as royals. So you get this rise of, this is when the dragons are actually coming back. And then, of course, literally, the dragons, some of the dragons haven't been a force in the, Clash of Kings and Storm of Swords, but they're even more of a force now. This is a force that you can actually ride this, and they're actually a danger to people, and they, will actually kill and eat people. So, this is when the dragons become less of a sort of a wonder of the world, and more of an actual tool that can be used and used in war and used going forward.
Nice. Very well said. Now, here's a tough question. A Dance with Dragons features highs and lows emotionally. What one moment or moments did you find the most, perhaps, poignant, affecting, or whatever word synonym for something that really struck a chord deep within you, that garnered a reaction? Maybe you had to set the book down for a minute, or it stuck with you. Whether it's something that is new to this reread, or something that's just consistent every time you read it. Lady Gwyn, what about you?
I think it's going to have to be Theon rescuing Jane, and then his reunion with Asha, with his sister Asha.
Nice.
And I think I'm going to reach back to when I joined you for the wrap up for Storm of Swords, and I think I chose my most poignant moment was the reunion of Arya and Harwin. That's a Storm, right? Is that Storm or Clash?
That would be
anyways,
Storm. Yeah,
that's Storm. Yokeboy will tell you that I get certain things about the Riverlands a little confusing. But yeah, so obviously reunions are the thing.
We should be having more of those in future books too. Some really big ones, right?
Look forward to them. We don't get many though, so far.
Yeah, Nina, looks like you have a different answer here. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, poignant probably isn't the right word here, but definitely emotional. Is reading Cersei's 2 chapters in this book, especially Cersei 1, where Cersei's quite literally being tortured, and this is it's not it's not subtle. It's she is literally being woken up multiple times every single night and demanding answers. She is literally being left without sufficient food and drink. She is literally being left almost naked in the cold. That's torture. That is unquestionably torture. And she's put through a specifically sexualized torture in her second chapter. And it's not that Cersei is an innocent person. Cersei deserves, some kind of justice for various things, but she doesn't, what she is being punished for is sex, plain and simple. And it's sex that Westeros considers consensual. It's sex that happened not when Cersei was married. It's the least controversial thing that Cersei has done of anything. Besides the Lancel part, which is controversial for reasons that Westeros doesn't recognize as controversial.
True.
But no, it's very sad to see even someone who has done as many villainous things as Cersei has really be tortured and really punished in a horrible way.
Well said. And Joe, how would you answer this one?
Well, firstly, I think Nina hit it on the head there, especially with Cersei, because she is such a villain, and that specific comeuppance or torture is really effective in making us say, oh no, we didn't mean this. Like comeuppance, yes, but not this one. This is far too far, George. And it's specifically because she's being punished for what their world has made her. They put her in that pigeonhole, and now they're saying, oh, we don't actually like that. You've done it too much. Now we're going to punish you for it. But as for my answer, actually, I don't think I've ever been as angry reading anything in my whole life as I was reading the whimper line when Jane whimpers to Theon. And in my mind, I don't stop swearing at Peter Baelish. I just continue that every day when I wake up and every night when I go to sleep. I'm still swearing in my mind at Peter Baelish. But that's a bit of a downer. I know my memory is failing me because, as you said, there's so many moments in this book where you do have to put it down and be sort of, what a line, what a moment. And they'll all come to me as soon as we log off. But the one that sticks out as the positive, I think, is probably one of the smaller ones. And it's in Quentin 3, I forget the name again. But when Jairus is trying to persuade him not to do this thing, and he says that men's lives have meanings, not their deaths. And you could just make that massive and slap it down over the whole series and go, listen to this guy, everybody. Stop marching to your deaths and trying to be a song. Just stay at home and be alive instead. Everything would be much better.
That's a really good take, and I'm glad you mentioned songs because I accidentally skipped this portion of the notes, and I wanted to point out that so we talk about what's there. We talk about what we see a lot of, but sometimes what we don't talk about is what's missing, what was there and what isn't anymore. And something that came up a lot in the earlier books was songs. So the theme of songs and how the songs either were echoing in someone's head, like Tyrion thinking of the song that reminds him of Tysha, or just lots of other songs like The Bear and the Maiden Fair, which, is kind of a goofy song, but it has thematic resonance even despite that. And also foreshadowing powers. But there's just very little song in A Dance with Dragons. There's very little singing. But what we do have is people living out some of these songs. Like we have a very real life Bale the Bard situation playing out at Winterfell. And we have a very real... potentially very real Danny Flint situation playing out at the Citadel and arguably elsewhere. So that maybe is that's not an answer to this question about emotional resonance, but I wanted to jump on that since Joe brought it up before I give my answer, which is going to be in line with a lot of y'all's. I am also going to cite Theon, but a different point in Theon's arc. Not that the ones you guys had mentioned are good. I just didn't want to be repetitive. But Theon, when he's confessing to the tree, when he's confessing his guilt, when he finally admits these things he did wrong, and that he admits that the Starks were the only family he ever knew, and it all just comes out. He starts weeping. That gets me, and it's interesting that so three of us named Theon / Jane. I mean, Joe, you really named Jane more than Theon. It was just in Theon's chapter. But to me, what's particularly interesting about this as well is that, especially because Nina mentioned Cersei, is that these are characters that, Jane aside, obviously, are not good guys, although we still see them as human beings. Theon maybe is coming around a bit. But Jon and Dany are just so tough. they don't break down. Like if Dany were to just break down weeping and think about all these horrible things that had happened to her, we might have named her. But she's just so strong. Like she doesn't break down. She's just like, I'm gonna keep going. Yeah, I'm out here by myself on the Dothraki Sea with nothing. I'm not panicked. Whatever, you know. And Jon is just like, duty, I'm powering through this. He doesn't sit there and go, oh man, woe is me. He doesn't just no tears fall, you know. So part of it is just our own humanity, just having sympathy for these characters having their these moments and not like processing what would really be going on in their minds. So I think that's pretty cool.
And actually, what you made me think of when you said that is even to some lesser extent, not as much as Theon and Cersei, because we obviously didn't get a POV from her, but even to a lesser extent, you know, the first appearance of Jane in A Game of Thrones, she's kind of being a childhood bully to Arya. You know, she's the one who calls her Arya Horseface. She's the one, and obviously she's not torturing her, but
yeah.
it is something that makes young Arya uncomfortable, and it's something that does hurt her.
That's
so
true.
It's easy to see Jade in that context as sort of a childhood bully, and someone that hurts our favorite Arya. So to see her go through real horror too is her own, you know, in her own way.
Yeah, good point. Okay, a few more questions here. Missy Castle Dreams. This is a little bit more of a prediction question. What do you guys think about? The question is, I subscribe to her becoming the great Khaleesi, but how? Will we have it be like a walking out of fire moment, or will, you know, kind of like the show, or she thinks the Drogon will be more involved in this, and I agree. So, quick theory time. What do you guys think is going to happen with that, with her base Dothraki Sea plot? Lady Gwyn, start with you.
Okay. I'm going to say I think that Drogon is going to leave her. He's shown that he's not very tame. So where she is right now, I mean, she's met these Dothraki. She's got Drogon by her side, but I don't think he's going to stick around. I think she's going to be taken back to Vaes Dothrak, because from a narrative perspective to me, and this would be in keeping with George's style, it makes a lot of sense for her to be completely disempowered. And you might think she is now, but she's got a ways to go before she really reaches rock bottom. Maybe even fall back into slavery.
It can always get worse.
Yeah, it's been such a huge theme in her life. So before she experiences, you know, this sort of triumph. And in support of this, I want to tell you guys about something that Kurt Vonnegut talked about a lot. If you Google Kurt Vonnegut, The Shapes of Stories, you can see a lovely video of him. He's very, very funny and entertaining, about 5 minutes long, talking about showing the shapes of stories on blackboard. And one of them is Man in a Hole. Basically, you got a man, doesn't have to be a man, could be a woman, could be whatever character you have.
A dragon.
They start out, I have an illustration for our listeners who are viewing. They start out here, they go down here, and they get back up
Don't
here.
get too fancy over here.
Literally, look, watch this video. So it's basically like a giant check mark. Man starts here, goes way down to the bottom, comes back up, and ends higher than where he started. Vonnegut says most of our stories can be boiled down to one of three different shapes. And that's one of the main shapes of stories. So that's a story that we all love because, you know, we love to see people pull themselves up by their bootstraps after they've reached rock bottom, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's a classic narrative structure. So I think Dany has a ways to go before she hits the bottom, that's part of what's coming for her.
It's comforting as humans to know that if you see someone reach rock bottom and then climb back out of it, you know, it gives you a sense that if you ever were to hit rock bottom, that you could climb out of it. Maybe that's part of what we like about it, is it makes us all feel more comfortable with ourselves. Now, Nita, your take here is similar, but you think it's going to be resolved a little quicker, I guess.
Or different is the way that I would
I mean, maybe it ends up in a similar spot, but like resolution stuff.
So I think where I differ is that I think that Dany is going to take on Jacko immediately, and I think that because it's very clearly set up, like very much emphasized in that last chapter. I remember Jacko, and I remember that he participated in the gang rape and murder of Aroa, and I really hate him for it.
Yeah.
Justifiably. So I can't imagine. Now, it's a little weird because it does leave off kind of, it's not clear whether Dany recognizes that it's Jacko, or because the story just says that's how Cal Jacko found her. So it's not clear whether Dany is the one who is recognizing, or the story is just pointing out that it is. But in any event, I think she's going to realize right away, and I think she's going to say, oh, hey, remember me? I'm going to do that thing that I promised to do to you 5 books ago, which is kill you for raping and murdering Aroa. And then I think what she's going to do is kind of tell his followers, listen, you gather everyone. I'm the leader now. I'm going to take over all of you. Go to Vaz Dothrak. And, this is the other thing that I kind of think of. Dothraki are impressed by 2 things, and that's strength and riding ability. There is nothing stronger or more impressive from a riding standpoint than riding a dragon.
Yeah, that's gotta be impressive. Yeah, there's gonna be some converts from that. Yeah,
I think that there's gonna be a sort of a sense of overawe, especially if Dany, burns Jacko. And again, I'm not gonna feel that bad because he is a rapist and slaver. So
yeah. I guess the question is, she could just. It could be a little bit like Brienne's feast ending, where she screamed a word, and whereas Daenerys could just the next thing out of her mouth could be Dracarys, and then. Like, if Lady Gwyn's right, Drogon flies away, and she's like, I said Dracarys, not fly away. But if not, maybe it's just instant
come back
burning.
Eventually.
Yeah. I think we all expect him to either stay or come back later. What about you, Joe? What do you think here?
Well, I'm kind of split right down the middle. I should say that I never really give that much thought to Dany and Vaz Dothrak. I kind of veer more back to Marine, and we know she's going to get back there anyway. But for this scene, I know what I want. I just don't know whether that's going to happen or not. What I want is for this last part at the end of her last chapter, where she does jump on Drogon again. I want that to be the unclicking moment where they've figured it out, and now he does what she wants. But I also wanted that back in Daznak's pit, and it didn't happen. So there's nothing to say it will happen this time. Maybe it is just this thing that's going to take ages, or maybe it even never really works. Maybe he's just too wild or whatever. So I could easily see what Lady Gwyn's saying. I can easily see what Nina's saying. The one that sticks out to me, because I actually forgot that this was so different to what we saw in the show. I forgot this, just they kind of meet. But the line that sticks out is that Dany went and stood by her dragon. That's just one short, sharp sentence. So I like to think that that's George saying, that's her making the physical choice, right? We've just had this chapter of me weighing everything up and looking back to go forward and all this stuff. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the dragon. And watch, I'll show you by using this dragon or demonstrating with this dragon. So like Nina says, I really think, Dothraki will just kind of bow to that sense of strength. Whether it is right here or maybe it's later on when Drogon comes back, it's going to happen anyway. So we're going to wind up in the same spot.
Cool. Yeah, I do think we all do. So basically, to summarize, Missy Castle Dreams, I think sounds like all 5 of us, including her, agree that Dany is going to become this great, is going to dominate somehow. The details, we'll just wait and see. My own take is too similar to y'all's to bother with, so we'll just move on. Let's see here. Next one would be, here's an interesting one from Randy B74. Just a few questions left. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get to all the questions. We just have too many good ones, and we don't want to give short, quick answers. We want to give thorough answers. So any questions that you all sent that didn't get answered, we will find a time to circle back to them one way or another, even if it's just me emailing you answers directly. So let's see. Randy B's question is, Theon thinks he's being watched from the Children's Tower as he approaches it, but we find out later no one is inside. I have a few quick takes on this. I really like y'all's answers here, so I'm going to get to that quickly. I think his guilt is maybe part of it. Being watched is something that is part of him, part of his, on his mind a lot. Like he thinks about how he's viewed. But it also may be foreshadowing what seems to be happening with him throughout the rest of the book, which is Bran is kind of watching him, especially at the end. With Asha's in Theon's Winds of Winter chapter, where Asha is talking to Stannis, and they hear about the ravens are croaking, and one of the Northerners says the gods are watching from their isle, and so it seems like Bran is quite possibly just paying attention, so that maybe Theon feels like he's being watched when he's at the tree also. But also there's just a general rise of mysticism in the books that starts off pretty mild. You get this big kickoff with the others, and then it just dies off for a while, and then it's just slowly been creeping up, and I think that maybe is part of it. But you guys have some great answers here, like I said, so I want to hear from y'all. Lady Gwyn, what do you think?
I think it's the Crannogmen up there. You know, their presence is noted in that chapter. They're obviously retaking the moat on
bog
some
devils.
level. Their bog devils are around. Theon's aware that they're there, but unseen. So I think, although we later learned that the Ironborn who were there in the Children's Tower are all dead because they were cannibalism again. They were, eating their dead fellows, and they got killed. But
can't be flayed by the Boltons if you eat each other.
I mean, maybe they should have all, I don't know, but I think it's what he sees is actually Crannogmen, but it does adds to the general feeling of guilt and of being watched that Theon experiences in the Dance with Dragons, and specifically in that chapter, he's been let free. He could run away. I mean,
that's true.
Here he is. He's going down the King's Road on a horse by himself, and he's thinking, "Oh, I could run away." And he's like, "No, you can't run away." I could though. No, you can't. No, you can't. So this is because he thinks someone's watching him. He's like,
great point. Yeah.
Ramsay will follow him. So
there's like 5 different things going on at least there. That's great. It's typical George. Like, which of these things is most prominent? I don't know. Which one draws your attention the most? I don't know. What do you think, Nina?
I think, just kind of go off of that too. I think the whole mood of that chapter is very ominous, and it's very ominous is really the word I want to use there. It's very foggy, and it's very not good, and Theon's very much feeling, like you said, very guilty about the past, and he's thinking very negative thoughts about the past. So feeling like he's being watched, whether or not he is literally being watched as opposed to, it's just sort of a thematic choice, I think gets to kind of setting the mood for the chapter of this is remembering a time he was here before that is very different from the time now. And it's gotten a lot worse from the time he was here before.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to bring up, is that it's such a contrast to when he was there with Robb as one of Robb's friends, and they were all so optimistic and riding off to war.
The past is watching him as much as anyone there is literally watching him.
And that very much relates to his guilt that we discussed, because obviously that's one of the major things he feels guilty over. So great point. Yeah, these themes merge really well quite here. Good question, Ramona. Ramona. Ramona's the next question. Randy is the one who asked the question. And Joe, what do you think?
Well, to what Nina said, I think I really like that chapter because it begins the physical retracing of steps and the memory that has to come along with that. He obviously already has guilt, but it's one thing experiencing that in the Dreadfort, or if he spends his whole book somewhere else in the North, then he's never going to get to quite the same level as he does, because this is essentially the warm-up act for Winterfell. This is, remembering Moat Cailin, that's one thing, but then he has to go back to Winterfell, really retrace his old crime. So as Nina said, that's what really hits on it, that you were there, you can, the memory is assaulting you, you're not getting away with it. And I think as for the watching thing, Theon was never watched enough growing up. He was the afterthought. He never fit in. So by the time he was a teenager, when we met him, he was the one to kick Garrett's head, and he was the one to make this joke and smile at the joke that no one else knew, and all this kind of thing. He wanted all the attention. So then he went and did something to gain the most attention from dear old daddy over in Pike, and that's how he wound up here. So now he has the reverse of that. He doesn't want to be watched. Because he has all this guilt, and he has this physical shame as well. He doesn't want anyone to see what's become of him, because it's a pride factor, an ego factor for him, in the same way that he doesn't ever want to be touched. So where he once wanted eyes, now he has them when that's the last thing he wants. And that goes through from here again to Winterfell, where he's going to be watched through the tree by Bran as well. So he's watched all the time now.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good answer. Yeah, very good. You guys gave a wide variety of answers there, and I think they all work. which is just a testament to George's ability to do so much within a scene. The next question, Ramona Zamfir. Cersei never thinks about murdering Robert's bastards, which I think initially the question was presented by her as perhaps a notion of conspiratorial. Maybe someone else did it. But upon thinking about this, I think a lot of us realize says more about Cersei than it does about perhaps missing information. Because he does mention that she would have killed Mia Stone, and she does think that Catelyn should have killed Jon Snow, which we remarked on at the time was like, whoa, well, that's something, isn't it? So maybe that's what it is. And thematically, lions, it's usually the males that do this. When a male lion takes over pride, they kill the children of the previous male. So Cersei is really acting like a lion and doing this, but maybe that is the point, that this is really what she is. The lack of guilt that is the point, perhaps. What do you think, Nina?
Yeah, I would go to that point. I don't think it's particularly notable for a few reasons. Number one, I don't think Cersei has any real reason to think about it by the time we get her POV. It's kind of in the past distantly. She's not actively pursuing it. It's not coming up as a question. So there's really no reason for her to think about it. And it's not that we need to get everything very explicitly laid out. Cersei never thinks, aha, and also I was the one who killed Melara Heatherspoon. But it's very obvious from what you take away from her POV that she was the one who murdered Melara Heatherspoon. So I think the fact that we hear about Janos Slynt, talking about it, the fact that we have Varys saying it was Cersei who did it, and the fact that we have Cersei thinking, man, Catelyn Tully was a mouse. She really just should have smothered baby John. I think that all goes to the point of, Cersei is absolutely.
That really does says a lot. Yeah, so it is more about Cersei. It's like, wow, she just doesn't have guilt over this, does she? Is that kind of how you see it, Joe?
Yeah, I think if we had her POV in Game of Thrones when Robert's Bastards was more of an issue, then it probably would have just come up at some point. But by the time we actually reach her, it's too far in the past. It doesn't matter. She would rather pretend they never existed anyway because they're staying on her honor. So she doesn't want to focus on them unless someone brings them up. And in general, she just doesn't think of anything unless it's either shoved in her face or she can see some advantage to be taken on.
Or it's like pleasurable. If it's not, like she thinks of like sleeping with Jamie, years ago, or stuff like that.
Yeah. But if it's not something she can use, if like the small folk essentially don't exist for her other than to worship her. Other than that, they're like, when she can't see them, they're not there.
That's a great
she
point.
Turns around and they are there.
I mean, think about what she did to like Sanel and all that. Like she has a little bit of guilt over that, but she doesn't even know these other kids. And you brought up the TV show, which is important here because it's part of the reason why I think this question comes up is that they did twist that in the show to make it Joffrey. Like they seem to make it that it was Joffrey that did the killings, not Cersei, which is odd. But at least that's part of the reason that there was maybe some room here. But I agree as well that it was almost certainly just it's about her. Is that how you feel as well, Lady Gwyn?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, I agree with Joe's points. And I think there's enough circumstantial evidence and other people saying she did it that it really it hardly matters. I do like what you said about lions, so I want to point out that all felines do that.
Oh, okay.
Even our humble house cats, as I was scarred to learn when I was a child.
No, don't say those things about kitties. No, just kidding.
I'm so sorry to tell you, I am a cat lover, but they will.
They are killers. So, yes, they are.
Yeah. That is a good point, though.
Cuddly, sweet killers. Okay, there was a few other questions that we're gonna have to save for another time. So, Treacherous Wendy, Guinevere Greenstones, Josh Allard, John Malarkey, a few of you others whose names I'm missing here because I can't hunt through every second of the document here. But we will try to answer your questions some other time. We are a bit out of time now. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Appreciate the questions. A lot of good questions. You led us into some interesting spots for us to discuss things. I learned some things that I hadn't considered, which is always the way with these books, isn't it? You gather your smart friends and talk about this series, and stuff happens. So let's see. I promised y'all some fun stats. I'll keep it brief. Some totality of our Valar Rereadis experience. A Game of Thrones was 23 hours, 48 minutes for Valar Rereadis, 19 minutes, 34 seconds per chapter. The Clash of Kings was 32 hours, 35 minutes, 27:56. So almost 28 minutes per chapter, so quite a bit more. It continued to increase for A Storm of Swords, 41 hours, 13 minutes for A Storm of Swords coverage, 30 minutes per chapter. A Feast for Crows was 32 hours total. Of course, there's a lot fewer chapters. 42 minutes per chapter, and then Dance with Dragons dropped back down to 38 minutes per chapter because they're slightly shorter. Feast does have the longest chapters, but Dance was the longest, 47 hours of podcasting. That's the edited version. So the video versions are longer, tend to be roughly 5 to 10% is cut out of each video. So the total length of Valar Rereadis, not counting the wrap-up episodes because I'm counting by chapters, would be 177 hours, 2 minutes, 50 seconds.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And then another 12 hours from these wrap-up episodes. So there you go. That's the totality of it. So we really did accomplish a lot there. That's a nice long fun challenge that we went through, and I think all
So you
of us
can do it in a week if you really want to. If you really dedicate yourself, you can do it in just over a week. If anyone's not busy.
Totally random, but on that topic, we have someone in our Discord server. We have a subgroup for talking about the show Vikings, and the show Vikings had its end right around the turn of the year here. And one person in our Discord said, yeah, so I watched it all last week and blah, blah, blah. And at first it didn't register. I was like, wait, you watched it all last week? You mean the whole season? And there's like, no, I watched all of Vikings, the whole 89 episode run last week.
2 days, 17 hours.
2 days, 17 hours, Ashaya says, the total runtime. So that was done. Someone did that in a week.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that is a lot. That's 89 episodes of 42 minutes.
Dedication.
Jesus. Well done. Well done. So thank you very much to our guests. Again, let's hear what you guys have coming. Nina, what have you been writing about over on goodqueenalley.tumblr.com with one L, as I like to say?
I don't know, everything and anything.
Yeah, that's always the case. You can't keep up. I mean, I can't keep up with all you are a very prolific writer. So I once again will recommend people check out your stuff.
I don't know. I've been writing wrote like 3 questions about the Lannisters over the past 2 days, and then I was writing things about the Hornwood succession, and then I was writing things about Daenerys, and then I was writing a whole bunch of things about Skahaz. So there's just basically anything on any given day. Oh, and I posted a WandaVision meme that will only be funny to people who've watched the show and know history. But if you know both, then it'll be hilarious to you.
Nice.
So if you like random asks about A Song of Ice and Fire and memes, then come check it out.
Cool. Yeah, I highly recommend it. And Joe, what about you? What have you got coming up? I know you said at the beginning you're almost done with your reread. You've got 1 or 2 more episodes to publish, and then what else you got?
Just
going on?
one. Well, even before I say that, let me say thank you to you and Ashaya for involving me in this in the first place, because where would Other Faces be without it? We wouldn't have any scraps and scrolls, which, as you say, has taken up quite a lot of time. So it's definitely been a large focus for me over however long we've been doing it. Yeah, we've got 1 more episode coming up. That looks to be quite a big one. We've just had a 5-hour episode for part 18, so I don't know what 19 will be. I'm hoping not 5 hours, but it might get close. And then afterwards, I shall sleep for at least 1 day. And I might say hello to my wife. I assume she still lives with me. It's touch and go. And maybe there's sunshine or something on the horizon for me. But then I might do some more podcasts. But probably those things first.
Well said, Joe. Well said. And thank you as well. We appreciate everything you've done. You and Nina both. You guys, your contributions to Valar Rereadis were just, I can't imagine what we'd have narrower takes. We'd have missed a lot of things. Just, it's been so valuable to have both you guys contributing throughout. So thank you. And Lady Gwyn, we have worked together a lot, more so than any other podcast in the community. We did all our Game of Thrones work together. We are working on Dance with Dragons stuff together still. That's ongoing, off and on. So this is nothing new, us working together, and it certainly will remain a regular thing. But again, please tell everyone what's going on with Radio Westeros apart from collaborations.
Okay, so yeah, I'm very much respect to all of you guys for your work here on Valar Rereadis. That's tremendous 177 hours. And Joe, all the work that you put in on Scraps and Scrolls is very, very impressive. And all I've done is just come in and sit in on 5 wrap-up. But I'm really happy that you've invited me to be part of this in some way. So thank you. Over at Radio Westeros, we are working, I mentioned at the beginning, we're doing our Winds of Winter Primer series. We've been going around the regions, catching up with characters, grouping them by region, and taking a look at sample chapters, if they exist, or just where we think things are going, if there is no sample chapter to lean on. We just released yesterday our Stormlands episode, so that's Arianne and John Connington and Aegon, and a lot of the things that we expect will be happening early in the Winds of Winter there. We got their live streams that will accompany that will be coming up shortly. Have some great guests lined up for that. And I am already, or myself and Yoke are already hard at work writing the next one, which will be The Reach. So we're going to tackle Sam and
it's hard
Aaron.
to tackle Sam. He's got a lot of.
We're gonna try. I hear he's pretty
large
slow.
Man. Yeah. You can catch him, but bring him
We
down.
can probably
hard.
catch him.
You will get past Gilly. That's the hard part. She'll
Yeah,
take you straight out.
And little Sam, don't forget about him.
She frightens me. But yeah, that's where we're heading next. And dare I say, we might convince our friend Joe to come back as a guest, maybe. For one of those
Go on,
live
then.
streams.
Cool. Well, also, I want to thank our mods over at our Facebook group. That's Scott and Ari and Rebecca and Laura and Tommy and Jennifer. You guys were clutch, hanging out in the group, making sure that every chapter is posted with artwork and discussions. That's a lot to keep up with. Again, we've been doing this for a while. It requires a lot of consistency and requires a lot of mental effort to be on top of things like that and to keep that as part of your routine for so long. Really appreciate that. So does the rest of the listeners, directly or indirectly, because that really helped us out. So whether you knew about it, whether you can tell, it made a huge difference. Thanks also to Julie A. here, sends a super chat late here. It says, thank you so much for a lovely VRR and for the A Song of Ice and Fire community. It's been a fun way to spend a few hours on a Sunday afternoon. Well, thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate your support. We appreciate the work you've done as well. I know you've submitted some good questions, and you dove some work with Amy Blackfire there on some good writing. So y'all check that out. And a super chat from Fattest Leech, just to keep you trucking. Appreciate that, Fattest Leech. Check out Fattest Leech's channel. She is doing some coverage on George R. R. Martin's other works, the Thousand Worlds stuff. I've been hanging out in the chat for some of those live streams, and that's good stuff, because you get some really early versions of some of the stuff that appears in Song of Ice and Fire, and it allows you to expand your knowledge and thought processes on some of these themes as well. Also, thanks to everyone else who's participated here and there, whether you're a regular commenter. A lot of you on Flick and Facebook and Slack and Discord were regular contributors. You heard your name mentioned regularly. Really appreciate that. Some of the best questions we got came from a lot of y'all, and that took us to new places. Karen Sita says, do we know when's the next Valar Rereadis? Okay. Well, we will not have one next week. I believe we'll be back either 2 or 3 weeks from now. So we were working out the schedule. We're lining up our guests, and we're working on the audio production versions of the Winds of Winter chapters, which have music and different people doing all the voices. Those are going to be really good. The Victorian one's almost done. It's the shortest, so we figured that would be the one to kind of get our teeth wet. Our teeth wet? What? Our feet wet? What the hell?
Or teeth.
Our teeth. Well, your
Could
teeth
be
are kind of
teeth.
wet all the time anyway.
We're gonna drink it down, and our teeth are gonna be wet.
What a strange turn of luck. Shay is laughing so hard. If you guys
you're gonna
can't
dive in teeth first.
What a strange slip of the tongue that was. Okay, well, anyway, so we've got lots more coming. We're going to be doing World of Ice and Fire. We're going to be doing the Winds of Winter chapters. We're going to be doing Fire and Blood, and we're going to be doing Dunk and Egg. The order of which we're doing those is what we're working on within the next week or two. So where we will post a schedule in all those all those various places. So just as long as you're connected to us in one of those spots, whether it be Flick, Discord, Facebook, Twitter, Slack, etc., you'll be in the loop. Or you can just, keep your feed refreshed and an episode will pop sooner rather than later.
Click that bell.
Yeah, hit that bell on YouTube to make sure you get notifications when we go live, as they say in the YouTube business. And also thanks to everyone else who's contributed from the outside. People like Michael Klarfeld, whose work is constantly present here, whether it's you looking at the maps behind us or hearing the music that he helped us find through Kevin MacLeod. Thank you to Kevin MacLeod for the music, and to Joey Townsend and Jesse Koval for the History of Westeros theme music. Thanks to our Bengineer for the sound quality assistance. Thanks to our many lovely patrons whose names I'll read here in a minute. We haven't done that in a little while. And check out Here Be Dragons. Our good friends over there are discussing the iconic movie Batman Returns. And as they do so well over there, discussing movies and shows and hanging out with friends, that's a fun time. They should be getting started in just a minute here. I've got just enough time for the Patreon credits. Perfect. I neglected to read the guys that usually get dropped at the beginning, so thanks to Lord Mark of House Joseph, the Snow in Winterfell, rider of Mazalacartho, a white dragon with green scales, horns, wings, and talons. Rest in peace, Mark. Talanis the Talon, king of Gagassos, rider of Telarius, a red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black. And Hunter of House Blackcloud, the Stormrunner, king of the sky, rider of Haranicon, the Windworm, a dragon with scales of brilliant platinum silver, horns, claws, and fangs of pure white with the eyes of the color of diamonds of fire. Jeff Gnarly is History of Westeros' Long Snapper. What a great guy. Our peers of the realm include the mysterious BR, Hand of the King, Lord Stephen Stark, titles, Hand of Queen Ashea, known as the Best, and of course, he is the captain of the Here Be Dragon ship. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire is the Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Kabeth the Unfrozen, Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light, Defender of the Old Gods and Warden of the North. Still unfrozen after all this time. Lord Brendan Lannister is the Blood Lion, ruler of Castle Everroar. Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle is King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, Commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet led by the flagship Caraxes and the Bloodstone Fleet led by flagship Prince Daemon. Jenny the Just is captain of the ghost ship Liberty, which vanished in the Shivering Sea over a century ago, but has been recently sighted near Volantis, if the tales can be believed. Yo, Jenny the Just, get away from Volantis. If I were you, I think bad things are about to happen there involving fire, and ships and fire don't mix too well. King Beyond the Wall, Sidney Jesse, the Fallborn, is Lord of Blue Spring and the Haunted Forest. He wields a dagger of Dragonglass and the Valyrian Steel Blade Red Frost. Perhaps the best armed free folk there is. There's also Sea Lord Sean Gallagher, the Titan's Binger, owner of 9 Valyrian Steel Ears. He listened to, 9 episodes of Valar Rereadis in one day, I believe he said. That's why he's the binger. Speaking of binging, that's right up there with that Vikings thing. Araya Flint of the Mountain Flints was captured by the Weeper, only to be raised in the Valley of the Milkwater. Blue eyes and golden memories. Alexander Greyblood is first of the first men, now crowned in ice, called Silencebringer, Woodblinder, and the Snow of Night, wielder of the ice-forged greatsword Pale Frost. Our small council includes Lord Benjen of House Hornwood, Master of Laws, Laura Boros, the Lady of Infinity, and Master of Coin, Bloody Ben Blackwood, Master of Whisperers, Grand Maester Liam Mullen, and Drowned Dan, Lord of House Windsor, Master of Karate, Friendship for Everyone, and Ships. Lord and ladies in their castle include Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron. Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell is Breaker of the Second Stone. Gregor the Toasty, still Lord of the Bread Fort. Ashlyn Winter is the Hawk's Eye, Lady of Castle Skyfall. The Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is wielder of the Valyrian Steel Machete Everglazed. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is Guardian Ranger of the hidden 100-acre Werewood, dual wielder of Valyrian short swords Glorious Morning and Little Light Wise, sharpshooter of the Werewood and Ironwood laminated longbow Todd Von Oben. When you fear things cannot get worse, Snugglebunny enters the fray. The Bastard of the Wolfswood is First Forester of the Old Gods. Sworn to House Iron Werewood, listen for the silence. Casey Stark is of House Acres. Peter Rivers is the Pale Dragon and heir to Bloodraven. Lady Mora of House Stark is Archmistress of Apothecaries and a Woods Witch. Her castle features werewood doors with painted moons. Lena Snow is the Twilight Star, bastard daughter of Dane, wife of the Trickster, and Lady of Castle Rivia. Lady Amy Blackfire is analyzer of Eastern symbolism, lover of poles, and dismantler of the patriarchy. King's Justice Sir Troy the Steady is wielder of the Valyrian steel blade Fate. Our Queen's High Council includes Rebea, Star-Eyes, Lady of Waves, and Mistress of Ships, Captain of the Iron Shadow Cat. In the shadows we bear our claws. Grand Archmaester Rennie, whose rod and ring and mask are Quartz Crystal, is wielder of the Valyrian steel pen, Fire and Ink. The Purple Lord, Leo Anansi, is Master of Whispers. Lady Wolfbird is Mistress of the Eastern Rivers, Gatekeeper of the Northern Skies, Daughter of the Silver Sea, and Master of Coin. Lady Carlin Carey of Castle Stonesharp, whose horse is shod in Valyrian steel, Prime Rider of the Rising Hills, and Master of Laws, rounds out that list. We also have our Kingsguard, led by Lord Commander Namian of House Darklin. The Night Slayer, Valyrian sword, is Onyx Abyss. Sir Dean the White Knight of the Black Star. Gregor Snow, called Snowbear, a bastard of Winterfell. Vaughn of House Firster. Sigil is mailed fist with extended forefinger and pinky on light blue field. Visenya let us hold Dark Sister once, is their motto. Sir Bateman, the Dark Knight, and Sir Roland de Stark, Gunslinger Knight of the Winter Kings. Back from a 20-year ranging to the lands of Always Winter to protect my King Aziz. Well, thanks for that. And our Queen's Guard is led by Lord Captain Commander Haema Helminth, the Sellsword Sentinel, backed by Sir Rambo, Knight of House Gannon, First Blood, Amber the Adamant, the Knight of the Mists and Mother of Squids, the Wintry Wolverine, we finish what you begin, Nora Nico, and Archmaester Vena, whose ring, rod, and mask are made of steel, not pudding. Also, shout out to Lord Commander George the Golden, Lady Rita of the Coppermane, the Unbound, Dance the Fervor, and Sir Jeff, Warden of the AC, wielder of Triad, the multifaceted beard of platinum red and brown, Stay Frosty. That is our Beard Guard. Last but not least, the History of Westeros' official, customary, homegrown Night's Watch, led by Lord Commander Richard the Ligerheart, wielder of Barry's Ankle Breaker, a flail with blue and silver Valyrian steel spikes, motto, Go Blue, and he is assisted by First Builder Maegor Snow, Maegor the Cool, as he's known, the Fire and the Snow, First Ranger Liam, a.k.a. Sir, waiting on a nickname, and First Steward Sir Jurion of the Torrentine, called Palewind. I tell you, folks, if you ever want to get better at talking, just read that list out loud. And, see what happens. So thanks again to all of y'all. We really appreciate all the support. Valar Rereadis has been an amazing journey. This is a milestone, not the end. So we look forward to seeing you all in the future for later episodes. Thanks again to our amazing guests. Oh, there was one more super chat. Okay. Stormy4400 says, thanks as always. Today was a lot of fun. Appreciate that, Stormy. Indeed it was. And as that message indicates, there's more to come. So thanks, everyone. And you know what I'm going to say next. Valar Rereadis.